I would like to wish everybody a very good evening and esteemed dignitaries, board members of Global Counterterrorism Council, alumni, press, and my fellow research coordinators. We have gathered on this auspicious occasion to celebrate the fourth anniversary of Global Counterterrorism Council as it steps into its fifth year. And we would like to extend a warm thank you to everybody who has been a part of this family and actively contributed to this think tank to achieve greater heights. I'm Shremoy Biswas, and my colleague Aditi Agarwal will be the MCs for the event that will happen today. We at GCTC have been extensively dealing with national policies and issues of security, which have been important and very pivotal in starting a dialogue and creating conversations which surpass boundaries. So, today we shall be looking into this journey so far, our work underway, and our future prospects. We have amidst us Dr. Shekhar Dutt today. Dr. Dutt is the former governor of Chhattisgarh, an IAS officer and a bureaucrat. He's one of the current patrons of the Global Counterterrorism Council and has been the Deputy National Security Advisor and Defense Secretary. Dr. Dutt has briefly served in the army and is also the recipient of the prestigious Sena Medal for gallantry in the 1977 Indo-Pak War. Sir, it's a pleasure to have you on board with us. If you can kindly speak a few words.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a real pleasure to be with such a galaxy of young people who are going to lead India, because all the time when the present has been sort of moving around with the past on its shoulders, the future is gearing itself. And I see a lot of people who represent our future, and it is really a great feeling to be here. I also see some of my very esteemed colleagues, Lieutenant General KJ Singh, who was GOC in Sea Western Command, which is our leading force, and also Lieutenant General Satish Dua, who was the head of the Integrated Defense headquarters, and therefore leading all the three different forces. And it's a pleasure, and it's also a pleasure to be along with Mr. Ved, who's a very well-known person in the civil services, and I'm really happy to be here. Now, I was just, before this meeting started, reminding Aditya of the time when this wasn't there, GCTC wasn't there. It was, a little earlier than 4 years. And we were very keen that all Kashmiris who have been pushed out of Kashmir, their own country, and their own land and their own state, they've been pushed out, and how to get the Kashmiris back settled in Kashmir as they were. And this was a big movement, and it is still to be achieved. But then we realized that Kashmiris have been victims of terrorism all the time, and terrorism from our neighbor, Pakistan, which is a very devious country. And they have been planning and executing these kind of terror attacks, and which has personally harmed a lot of Kashmiris, and ultimately a large number of them they suffered both material and their lives. And then in their own country, they've been displaced. And then while we were at it, we also realized that terrorism is not just a phenomena here, because Pakistan has been involved in terrorist activities elsewhere, and Pakistan's the national policy of the Pakistani forces has been low intensity warfare, and therefore terrorism has a global connotation. And this global connotation of terrorism is very acute, and many of these other countries have found that to be a tool for achieving what they think is victory. So the Soviet Union, when they were in Afghanistan, their forces were in Afghanistan, and suddenly US took help of Pakistan, and Mujahideens were formed on the name of jihad and many other things, and different countries also contributed to this form of terrorism, which ultimately drove the Soviet forces out of Afghanistan. This was the birth of a new concept of fighting. I have, as you introduced me, I fought in the 71 war, and we have been extremely fortunate to meet force against force, and taking action on a more even platform. But the terrorism brings in a whole lot of other dimensions, and Pakistani army found that to be a extremely good method of becoming somewhat better placed than before, and therefore they evolved a large number of tactics which goes on, planting IUDs. I don't know, young people like you have ideas, but you have read how IUDs are made, and these devices cause most unexpected but enormous amount of damage. And they can bring down a building, they can bring down a convoy of whether it is forces or anybody. And all these kind of tactics were evolved in this process. And in fact, the Pakistani ISI, which is a body of their force itself, of the army. It is called Inter-Services Organization, and they provide all kinds of training to these terrorists, who will then move outside and create this thing. You have seen, many of you must have been in school, and but you have seen how 26/11 was accomplished by them, and it is so easy to nab or get into a hotel, and then create havoc by even using small arms. But if you use small arms, if you use grenades, if you use other ways of harming larger numbers of people, you can. And just before that, we had some other places also, we had terrorist incidents. And then how is it all connected? When you see the other global scenes of terrorism. So we had embassy bombing, we had London tube bombing, and then finally also we had 9/11. I have been telling my American counterparts, because I was Defense Secretary and I was negotiating with the Americans for a fairly good amount of very intensive discussions to set up the Indo-US framework for defense. Now, I have been telling my American counterparts that whatever place any large terror event has happened, you find the perpetrators, the leaders of that terror, the people who have planned that terror event, their footsteps coming into Pakistan. And they have gone into Pakistan, they have met the so-called stalwarts, whether they are of the force or out of the force, but they have met, they have validated whatever they want to do, and then they have come back to the place where they have organized this terror activity. Now, so therefore, we are on a very near. We are absolutely sitting side by side with an extremely devious country. I mean, you can't believe that a country can be so devious because it uses all kinds of false things, and and it has absolutely no shame or even the feeling of that their innocent people, some of their very young people are going to die, and so they push them into the altar of fire, and ultimately they all are killed. There is no way that terrorism which emanates from Pakistan can succeed in harming India, but it harms a lot of lot of innocent people. And you, many of you must have participated a webinar just a few days ago by GCTC when the terror victims spoke about their own experiences. How did they, how they were, terror was committed onto their families, onto their localities, and how they were victims. Now, this is how it is. Terror actually tries to bulwark, kind of create an enormous noise and harm innocent people, and therefore the innocent people shrink away from this thing. The terror doesn't really affect the forces. The forces, if they can, if they are only concerned, then they can meet very squarely with the terrorists. But it is the terrorists, they will not come and do harm to the forces. They will come and into places which people are not expecting anything. In fact, it's neither a military target nor even a tactically important target. It is just a place where human beings congregate. Now, that is how it is. And Global Counterterrorism Council has done wonderfully well in bringing together a large number of people, bringing together these accomplished people, like I mentioned, General Dua and General KJ Singh, and I also noticed Sanjeev Tripathi, who was our the chief of the NTRO and other organizations. I see Mr. Wade. Now, all these people and many more, General Atta Hasnain is going to speak, many other very, very accomplished people from the forces, armed forces, Army, Navy, Air Force, and also from the police and from the civil services. And it's a tremendously good job GCTC has done in getting together all these people. And I am extremely happy actually that GCTC, by another of its resolve, has got such a large number of very bright young people. And this is an extremely important task for all of us who are living in the present, to train the people who are going to take on take on India's charge, and the baton will be given well into trained people's hands, not only trained in activities that they are going to do, but also trained in the mind, and take on with the enormous responsibility that, yes, you will lead India to a much bigger glory. Today, India is on the threshold of becoming a world power. I've seen India at the time when it was not part of a global power body, but it was on the periphery, but it was still considered to be a fairly important country. I have seen the time when Soviet Union led one side and the American led other side, and this was called the East-West tensions, and there were two poles. and even China wasn't any power at that time. In fact, India was a greater power than China, and and I've seen that. And gradually, after the Soviet Union collapsed, US became the single pole, and then the Chinese emerged. So they were going on to form two pole, bipolar. India claimed it's this thing because the people of India and such a wonderful lot of Indian capable people, especially in the armed forces, put India into the map of becoming a power, and we are on the way to be a global power, and there's no way we can be stopped. But here's the time when you chaps, you persons, young persons, will be required to take on the load, and you I see from the continents of every one of you that you are cheerful and you want to take up this kind of challenge in a way that that nobody can do a better job than this. I also convey my best wishes and also recognition to Aditya Tikku and Mr. Vijay Tikku and all the other people who have been at the background slowly but very resolutely putting GCTC on the global map and putting GCTC into the kind of competence that no other organization has. I wish everybody all success in the task that you are doing, and I wish everybody else, all my friends, my old colleagues, very happy anniversary. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for those words. It's absolutely true that India's position in the world and the way it has stopped the power from being polarized in the hands of a few countries and the pivotal role it has been playing shall always play in our minds. Thank you so much, sir, for the words. We'll now be having the alumni joining us to share their experiences and to talk about the time they were associated with GCTC and who have been the backbone of the institution through thick and thin. So may I request my colleague Ananya Singh to carry on the proceedings from now.
Hi everybody, it's an honor to be here and an honor to have some of our alumni with us today. We'll just be having a short question and answer session with them and ask and talk about their experiences with GCTC. So firstly, I'd like to say that I had the honor to actually work with some of these great minds, and it's nice to see that even after we leave GCTC, we get to be connected with the organization as the alumni. So first we'll have Sheta ma'am. Ma'am, could you tell us something about how your experiences were with working with us in GCTC?
Yes, sure. Thank you so much, Ananya. First of all, good evening to all the distinguished luminaries and Aditya sir and all my peer friends who have actually worked with me and the ones who are back again in GCTC. So some I have known just by the names and some I've actually got to interact with. So it always feels very nice to, come back to GCTC and I feel like, the internship doesn't end. So for those of you who don't know, I have been associated with GCTC since April 2020. And right when, time started getting worse and then we started getting into this whole situation of the pandemic, and when we were all almost clueless as to what to do. So that is exactly when, I just randomly applied. To be very honest, I just very randomly applied, not knowing if I would actually get selected for the internship. And then maybe, I don't know if it was the right time or I spoke to the right person and all that. But then Aditya sir actually, he just eased in the whole task of getting into GCTC and has made the whole process a much more, and actually a process which, which we have enjoyed learning. And at the same time, we've gained sumptuous knowledge. So that is the part that, like that's one of the main things when I look back at GCTC, that's the first thing that actually comes to my mind. Yeah, so thank you so much for that. I think I'll get back.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Next, we have Abhijit Nagpal. Sir, could you please tell us something about your experiences with GCTC?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, yes, you are.
Hello. Hi. Yeah, so I interned with GCTC for 2 months in 2019, June and July. And I think for me personally, it was a truly educational and informative experience because so basically GCTC came to our university to do some hiring and outreach, and there I applied for the internship, not knowing that what was I getting into. I hadn't heard of GCTC before, but I thought it was an intriguing concept, and I was really interested in researching and studying about terrorism and ways to counter it. So personally, that's why it was so it was a huge learning experience for me. While I was there, we spearheaded and managed two conferences. That was Modi 2.0 and Kargil Vijay Divas. And throughout the course of the two conferences, I learned so much and I met so many different people. That was a very enlightening experience overall for somebody who was just in second year of just starting the second year of his career. Yeah, so that's why like it was a very good experience for me personally, and I had the opportunity to work with a very good team as well. Our team of interns were very proactive and always on our feet whenever anything was required of us, and we had a lot of very interesting and very informative lectures also that really expanded the horizons and expanded the scope of my own intellect. So overall it was a great experience for me, and yeah, that's it.
Next, we have Bhavya ma'am. She is a student of economics at the University of Delhi, and we got to work with her. Ma'am, could you tell us something about your experiences with GCTC?
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here.
Good evening, ma'am. So, could you just start by telling us about how your experiences with working with GCTC was?
For sure, for sure. This is something I can honestly go on about at length at any point in time. Because I have such fond memories associated with my 3-month long tenure at GCTC. I joined as someone who was just interested in the domains that GCTC works in. And I started off as someone, although someone who had interest but didn't really know what to do with it or where to channel it or how to build upon the layers of knowledge and sort of make sense of the very very varied thoughts that I had. So that's who I was when I stepped into GCTC, and by the time I left, I was an individual who had a truckload of experiences, a lot of great friends, and have had the very grateful opportunity to work on all these projects that were so enriching that I could see myself, my knowledge base, my skill set grow in the 3 months that I was here. And having worked under brilliant leadership, having worked with the brilliant minds, I worked with students who were much senior than me and from very eminent universities like JNU, and from DU, I'm from DU myself. So people who were very senior, people who were my peers, and I had a chance to share their experiences, share their um, very very varied and very vibrant knowledge and their words of wisdom, if I may say. And that's just to say from my daily work. I also had the opportunity to interact with all of these esteemed dignitaries who were there and who used to address us, who used to tell us how to go about writing, researching, formulating our thoughts, structuring our arguments, and things of the like. So, as a GCTC alumni, although one who is quite tardy today, it gives me immense pleasure to be able to come back to this platform and give back to this platform. And I feel that I'm really grateful for being able to do that. So I think that sums up my experiences and my journey pretty well. Thank you so much, Ananya, and thank you so much, Aditya sir. I'm sorry to keep you all waiting, but I felt like I hope my experiences added to what was shared this evening. And thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was very great to hear. Shraddha ma'am, could you tell us something about any changes or any growth you noticed in yourself after you interned with us at GCTC and then left the organization?
Yeah, sure, Ananya. So basically, yeah, so definitely there has been a lot of growth. And both in growth, I think I was able to get the right push at the right time. So that was basically possible only because I got the chance to intern with GCTC. So maybe, I mean, I was very new to the field of interning, although I'm doing my master's right now because I've had a different, I mean, my schooling was completely different, and I kind of took some time to sink into the whole subject of political science and international relations. So for me, so GCTC has helped me boost, you know, like it has helped me strengthen my base, that is knowledge base, as well as it has also boosted my confidence to, you know, to a different level where sometimes I used to feel if I'm actually, you know, putting the right amount of efforts being as a master's student. And that when I joined GCTC, the whole perspective changed that no, I thought that yes, I could do it. That's only because I had people who were believing in me and who were entrusting work. So that was much more important because that kind of environment, I don't think, which, you know, is possible for an intern or somebody, nobody would hand over such a huge responsibility of organizing an event or, you know, speaking to experts directly and, you know, clearing the doubt and, you know, just to pat our back and say, hey, nothing is small. So everything is a learning process. And, you know, everybody are there to enlighten us and to teach us. So that is one of the main things that I have learned from GCTC. And now, yeah, I don't, yeah. So after leaving GCTC also, as I said, this whole, you know, this journey hasn't ended because Aditya sir, you know, calls up every other day. Not only, you know, not because just we were associated for work reasons, but, you know, as I'm not sure if using the word friend is the right word or whatever, but then he used to always call up to check if we are going well in our study. Or, you know, he's always there to help. So that is one thing which I've actually gained out of GCTC. And yes, definitely, I got a lot to learn from my peers also. So yeah.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. I can definitely agree and relate. I think most of us at GCTC that when we come in, we're completely like new and fresh, and suddenly we just dive into this world and we get to talk to so many experts just right now. And it's a super quick learning experience that you're a completely immersive part of. So, Abhijit sir, like I have one more question for you. So what would you say, like, would you like to highlight some moments, some favorite moments or learning experiences or any funny moments that you had in your time in GCTC that you'd like to tell us about?
In particular, one of the most memorable moments was that when we were hosting the Kargil Vijay Divas event, sir suddenly called me up on stage to give the thank you note for some reason. I mean, he hadn't told me that before. So, and there were like I think more than 200 people there, and you know that kind of pressure is there when you suddenly have to go on stage, and now he's like called your name and everybody's looking at you. So that was one of the, I think it also taught me to, you know, think on my feet and, you know, always be ready with something. So now if anybody calls me on stage, suddenly I'll be ready. I know what to say at least. That was really funny for me. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. I think a lot of us can relate to that. In my first 2 days of joining GCTC last month, I was asked to anchor the KVD event. And just like being spontaneous and thinking on your feet, like this is an activity that teaches you so much more than maybe just books or theory. And well, I think that's it for our alumni session. Thank you so much, Shata ma'am and Abhijit. I'm sure we can all attest that we're very glad to be part of a family like GCTC family that even if we formally leave, we'll always have a connection to and we'll always be able to learn and grow. So thank you so much. And now I give the floor back to my co-hosts Srimoy and Aditi. Thank you guys.
Thank you, Ananya, and thank you for all the words from our alumni. You have been an invaluable asset to the organization, beyond doubt. We'll now be handing over the proceedings to my fellow research coordinator, Ms. Divyali Mehrotra, who shall help us retrace our steps into our past projects and give us insights about our future initiatives. Over to you, Divyali.
Thank you so much, Srimoy. Good evening, everyone. Welcome, esteemed dignitaries, guests, and members of GCTC. We want to thank you for joining us in celebrating 4 years of the Global Counter-Terrorism Council. My name is Divyali Mehrotra, and I will be taking you through GCTC's journey, which began in 2016. The mission of the Global Counter-Terrorism Council is to shape intellectual discourse and dialogue and impact public policy uniquely. GCTC aims to focus on the vulnerable areas and suggest countermeasures in the formation of the national security strategy. Our patrons have been our pillar of support. I would like to thank them on behalf of GCTC. Mr. Prabhat Kumar, General J.J. Singh, Dr. Shekhar Dutt, Mr. Shashank, Dr. Yogendra Narayan, Mr. Prakash Singh, Mr. Nikhil Kumar. Thank you so much. I would like to introduce you to the Executive Council of the Year 2019-2021. Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma, Vice Admiral Shekhar Sinha, Air Marshal Ramesh Rai, Lieutenant General Shokin Chauhan, Lieutenant General KJ Singh, Mr. Zafar Sareshwala, Mr. Kuldeep Khoda, Professor Sudhir Sopuri, Mr. Anil Vadwa, Dr. Nirmaljit Singh Khalsi, Professor M.D. Nalapat, Dr. Sanatan Kulshestra, Ms. Prabha Rao, Ms. Neeru Abrol, Dr. Sandeep Marwa, Mr. Karnal Singh, Ms. Reena Mitra, Major Gaurav Arya, Lieutenant General Satish Dua, Mr. Gautam Bambawala, and Mr. Aditya Tiku. Thank you for your continued guidance. I would also like to thank the Board of Advisors, featuring Mr. Kanwal Sibal, Mr. Sanjeev Tripathi, Mr. G. Parasarati, Lieutenant General Atta Hassanen, Dr. Kavita Sharma, Mr. Satish Mathur, Mr. Vijay Bakaya, Mr. Salman Chishti, Mr. Ashok Khurana, Mr. Bhupendra Chaube, Mr. Sadashiv Bajpai, Lieutenant General Suresh Sharma, Air Marshal R.K. Sharma, Ms. Navika Kumar, Ms. Suhasini Haider, Colonel Shailendra Singh, Mr. Sushil Pandit, Professor S.K. Singh, Mr. Krishnan Verma, and Mr. V.K. Batra. Thank you for your continued advice to GCTC. The journey of GCTC began in 2016, and on 6th August 2016, GCTC organized its first public event in that center in New Delhi. The agenda of the conference was Global Terror and India, the Current Trends, and Terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir and the Role of Media. On 26th August 2016, GCTC was officially registered as a non-partisan think tank, which is why today, on 26th August 2020, we celebrate 4 years of GCTC. The journey continued in 2017, where we organized 2 major conferences. Indus Water Treaty, past and present, held at the India Habitat Center, was organized between 16th and 17th June. It hosted sessions on the various agendas like climate change in Indus Basin, power generation and dimensions, Indus Treaty, the way forward. The Counter-Terrorism Analyzing 2611 conference was organized on the 9th anniversary of this sorrowful day in our nation's history. This conference had 3 sessions which analyzed and understood the impact of the event: global and regional response to terrorism, combating terrorism, and terrorism, media, and governance. 2018, my apologies. Here are some glimpses of 2017. 2018 was a fruitful year for GCTC. A major highlight of this year was the Secure India National Conclave, highlighting internal security and border management issues. This was held between 24th and 25th April. Sessions were held on some very pressing issues such as the security challenges in the Northeast, modernization of police force, left-wing extremism, effective disaster management, security in Jammu and Kashmir, cyber security, infrastructure in border areas, countering drones and smart technology, the way forward for combating terrorism. The Counter-Terrorism Conclave dealt with GCTC's endeavor of counter-terrorism, held on 26 November 2018. The sessions were AFPAC, Epicenter of Global Terrorism, International Consensus on Cross-Border Terrorism, Terrorism and Economy in India. We also conducted a workshop on gender mainstreaming in criminal justice responses to violent extremism leading to terrorism. This was organized on the 5th of December. This event was organized in collaboration with the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, or UNODC. It focused on the perspectives of law enforcement and civil society vis-a-vis the challenges in gender mainstreaming. Here are a few glimpses. In 2019, we had more greater heights to achieve. On the 7th is the conference titled Decoding New India, Modi 2.0, Foreign Policy and National Security. At this event, the memory of late Defense Minister and Chief Minister of Goa, Manohar Parrikar, was also commemorated. The conference had lively discussions on foreign policy, water and energy security, and national security. On the 28th of August, the India-US Partners in Defense and Global Security Challenges was organized by GCTC. This conference initiated dialogue on the India-US Defense Partnership and Cooperation and the global war on terror. Some other seminars were conducted focused on specific issues such as mapping the way forward for J&K and strategic shifts in the Pacific region and how they might affect India's outreach in the South Pacific. We at Global Counter-Terrorism Council have been paying tribute to the martyrs of the Kargil War every year by organizing the anniversary at the Amar Jawan Jyoti at India Gate. A large number of army veterans, senior bureaucrats, academicians, young university students, NCC cadets, and families of war martyrs are invited to pay their tribute. We at GCTC believe that it is our duty to honor the fallen for our country. Eminent personalities also speak a few words to honor the ones who laid their lives. They narrate stories of their valor and courage to inspire the youth. This is then followed by a wreath-laying ceremony and a cultural program. Even in this ongoing pandemic, this did not pose a hindrance to our celebrations to the Kargil Divas. We organized an online event where people from all across the country came together to pay their tributes to the martyrs. Here are some more glimpses of GCTC. Here we have the GCTC members briefing Honorable President of India, Shri Ramnath Kovind. A delegation led by former Governor Dr. Shekhar Dutt briefing Honorable Vice President of India, Shri Venkaiah Naidu, about security developments and activities of GCTC. Another delegation, again led by Dr. Shekhar Dutt, briefing former President of India, Shri Pranab Mukherjee, about the activities and future projects of GCTC. We also had a GCTC delegation that briefed former Union Defense Minister, Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman, about past activities and future programs of GCTC. And now coming to future programs of GCTC, we at the Global Counter-Terrorism Council wish to contribute to the development of our great nation. Keeping this in mind, we aim to conduct 3 international and 15 national dialogues annually with relevant, qualified, and appropriate representatives and resource people, with a minimum of 600 delegates internationally. Our first international conference is titled India's Strategic Partnership with the Quad Countries in the Indo-Pacific. The purpose of the conference is to essentially shed light on India's role in the Indo-Pacific, especially in collaboration with the Quad countries. The dialogue also aims to bring about clarity regarding India's diplomatic alignment to the region. Our second international conference titled Global Nuclear Proliferation aims to study the cases and implications of both the total and the selective proliferation schools of thought, on the imminent world order, and further specifically analyze India's prospects towards the same. Our third international conference title, Call to Action Against Fossil Fuel Subsidies for an Energy Secure World, aims to study India's energy subsidies in line with India's G20 peer review of fossil fuel subsidies. We hope this conference ushers in more sustainable energy systems as well as responsible welfare initiatives across the world. Coming to our national conferences, the GCTC National Human Rights Conference addresses the disturbances in the nation due to mass migration and calls attention to the need for rehabilitation of the victims of human rights abuse. The Indo-Afghan 2.0 aims at creating greater access to an understanding of India-Afghan relations and gauging India's influence in the region. The Energy for Security and Diversity Conference aims at opening up a dialogue amongst stakeholders, policymakers, and leaders on the crucial issues of energy security, the security of energy infrastructure, environment security, and the geopolitics of energy in India. The Anti-Money Laundering and Combating the Financing of Terrorism aims to bring forth awareness and acumen with regards to money laundering and financing of terror and discuss ways and instruments to mitigate these threats, cutting it right at the root. The modernization of India's defense infrastructure for security wishes to put forth ideas via which recommendations can be made to improve the infrastructure in place for defense and bring forth the ideal policy changes that would improve the infrastructure on the defense mechanisms in place in the nation. The gender mainstreaming in security and counterterrorism domain aims at informing individuals of a holistic picture of the gender dimensions in terrorism and the norms as well as the outliers that are witnessed. Definitely a unique perspective via GCTC. The India-Japan-US, the new Triple Entente, promotes a dialogue which explores the prospect of this partnership and assess what this important pillar of democracy can hold for the world's future, especially with regard to growing distancing from globalization. The Siliguri Corridor, strategic implications and the way to secure it, aims at providing an understanding into the geopolitical importance of China's presence in this disputed territory, India's advantage, and the potential policy actions that can be taken to secure this extremely important region for India's security. The Indo-Russia dynamic post-COVID-19, a relationship of need or deed, seeks to analyze India's strategy for Russia and make it more suitable for Indian geopolitical interests. We want to find how economics can strengthen Indo-Russia relations and what impact can this relation have on the approaching global order. The conference on relooking at the role of multilateral institutions in the light of COVID-19 aims to develop and analyze India's plan to action. The conference titled 50 Years of Indo-Bangladesh Partnership wishes to define a new path for Indo-Bangladesh ties in the light of the changing world affairs. The conference on BRICS analyzes India's future approach to BRICS. We expect to redefine and reanalyze the effects that BRICS can have on global affairs, and to what extent can the overall agenda of BRICS be aligned with India's key strategic goals. The conference on ASEAN, the key to Asian stability, details on India's Act East policy, which is one of the major foreign policies under the Modi government. And finally, via the conference on 60 years of Indus Water Treaty, we wish to reinterpret this treaty in light of changing realities and explore ways in which this treaty can be used for India's strategic and security concerns. Moving on, we also have the GCTC Yuva Manthan, which is a program that aims to increase global youth engagement via social media through a minimum of 100 interviews with youth of the region and eminent stakeholders, thereby having a more overall perspective into the various pressing matters in the nation. Here are a list of the events. Voices of Jammu and Kashmir, China's One Country, Two Systems policy, Connecting India's Northeast, Insights on the SDG, Violence in the Red Corridor, Maoist Insurgencies in India, Water Security. The webinars and workshops that are displayed on your screens are designed to reach out to a large plethora of individuals from various regions. In the recent past, GCTC has been successfully engaging with nearly 5,000 students from top universities across the world, like the University of Delhi, Fairfield Institute of Management, King's College London, Jawaharlal Nehru University, etc. Additionally, GCTC has been involved with journalists from CNN, The Hindu, and The Sunday Guardian, alongside the Indian military services and public servants from public sector entities such as ONGC. Our initiatives, like the Manthan series and e-conferences, desires to establish a platform which acts as a congress for international experts and provides an opportunity for global youth engagement. This will help strengthen the track to diplomacy and bridge the gap between the Government of India and its people. The Global Counter-Terrorism Council strives towards creating resources and strategies to plan the nation's security framework. We humbly thank you for all your support all these years. Thank you.
Thank you, Divyali, for your valuable insights. Good evening, everyone. This is Aditi Agrawal, the second MC for today's event. Now we would begin with our first session. Violent extremism and terrorism have been and continue to be significant threats and sources of conflict and instability. While the impact of the current COVID-19 pandemic on the scope and nature of these threats is not yet fully understood, several distinct trends will be important to track. It is in this light that GCTC is conducting a discussion on the topic counter-terrorism in COVID-19 era on this auspicious occasion of its 4-year anniversary. We have amidst us, I request the audience to enter their questions in the chat box, which will be entertained by the moderator. Now I would like to hand over the session to our moderator, Major Gaurav Arya, and I respectfully request the panelists to complete the session within 45 minutes.
So the topic of discussion today is counterterrorism in the COVID-19 era. I think what has happened here is that before I sort of request the panelists to give their comments, I think what has happened is that the COVID-19 has changed the very definition of terrorism as we knew it. What has come out, and there are many people who are saying this, including many sections of the American intelligence service and the European intelligence services, is that, somewhere along the way, this is bioterrorism. What has happened from a Wuhan lab is bioterrorism. The jury is still out on that. So there are no definitive proofs that we can submit here or talk about. Also, the fact that how the countries have aligned together. Earlier, the speaker was talking about the Quad, which is essentially Japan, Australia, US, and India. But coming back to counterterrorism, how do you see Turkey reacting in Syria? How do you see China carrying out terrorism against its own people? How do you see this entire issue fanning out post-COVID? And COVID is still here. And according to some estimates, it will be a few years before it actually goes away. While people are talking about a vaccine which is on the way, and India has said that by the end of this year, they should have a vaccine in the market. But again, there are many countries who are claiming that. Let's hope for the very best. I start off by this session by going directly to Lieutenant General Satish Dua. Jain, sir. And what I would like to talk to you about is that, sir, this entire thing about COVID and, sir, counter-terrorism in the COVID era. Now, do you think that the definition of terrorism itself has changed after COVID? Because earlier, when we spoke about terrorism, we talked about ISIS. We spoke about Al-Qaeda. We spoke about the Boko Haram, or we spoke about much more closely home. So you've been GOC 15 Corps. We spoke about the Lashkar-e-Taiba, the Jaish-e-Mohammed, the Hizbul Mujahideen, and sundry outfits operating out of Pakistan. Suddenly, this entire terrorism has been given a new dimension with China as the epicenter of what many people are saying is actually bioterrorism. The jury's still out on that. I'm not making any definitive comment, but there are very strong and sane voices in the world that are saying that this is nothing short of bioterrorism. Your comments, please, sir.
Jai Hind, Gaurav, and thank you. Jai Hind, everyone. It's a pleasure and a delight to be here to share thoughts with you and to join everyone in celebrating the 4th anniversary of GCTC. Diving straight into what Gaurav, what you asked me. First, allow me to paraphrase or allow me to respond on two different levels. One is the question that you asked me. That means if it is bioterrorism, then how do we see it panning out, and has it changed the entire paradigm of terrorism, amongst other things, so to say. And the second one, allow me not to say this, and I will point out what it is, and I'll talk about that separately. The first one, well, if it is bioterrorism, like you yourself said, and everyone knows that the jury is still out, we're not very sure, but let us assume that if it is bioterrorism, okay, even if this is not bioterrorism, it shows the way. It shows the way to anyone who is interested that this can be used as a tool, if not, even if this is not it. So then couple of equations, a couple of dynamics that you mentioned, and I'm sure you were just being illustrative when you said, okay, Turkey and Syria or some other country can use it here or there. That is only one or two. There will be numerous such dynamic that can be the potential exists for it to be used. Now, if that is going to be another thing, it is almost like the nuclear threat that was there for the country. In fact, even more, that was there for the world, even more so, because this is very easy to accomplish and spread if the intent is there, or such like bioterrorism is easy to do it. How do we see the world dealing with this if we get to that sort of situation? I think a far the greater damage can be caused by very little investment, and the consequences can be longer lasting than just what happens at the moment. I mean, it can go down to the next generation, etc. So the world really is a cause of concern. The world will really have to come together, not only in the knowledge of it, but also in sharing intelligence about it, also sharing the remedial measures as to how to fight a thing like this, also look into the ethics of it very strongly. That means when any country, let's say, indulges in anything like that or is suspicious of it, the whole world has to come down on that country like a ton of bricks so that no one else does it. The point I'm trying to make, that is going to be very, very different reality. We would have to join forces together so that we weed those black sheep out, which can actually use this as an instrument to impose its will on other country or countries. Having said that, I mean, that's the way I see this as an instrument of terrorism, and how we, just broadly speaking, and I'll later on join the discussion as you go ahead, Gaurav.
Absolutely, sir.
I want to also talk about the second aspect, and I purposely did not name what it is. And the second aspect I want to say to all of you, the title of this reads Counter-Terrorism in COVID era, COVID-19 era. Now we are already living through the COVID-19. What happened in COVID? The world was stunned. We all sat indoors. We did stop moving around for initially. The world was stunned into being indoors. The death counts initially were very shocking. Slowly today, you and I switch on the news in the morning and we just hear the figures, and half of us don't even remember how many the count has gone up, how many deaths have gone. Oh, today one more record. Every day there is a record, either in America or in India or someplace. So slowly acceptance has come in. Restrictions have eased out. People are moving cautiously. Those who don't have to travel, don't travel. You can work from home, then you work from home. But a lot of people have started going out. Traffic is less on the road, but it is there. What I'm trying to say, some who can live with a modified way of living to save themselves from this COVID-19 are doing it. Those who can't are working out. I mean, the labor class is actually working. Some places even not following the norms. What I'm trying to get at. But tell me, can you all imagine what is life on LOC? Does a soldier stop doing what he's doing? No. COVID or no COVID, there are certain things that just go on. Why is the life on or a soldier on the LOC as vigil? He doesn't care about all this, and he whatever precautions he can take. He is there because an infiltrator, when like he uses bad weather, like he uses a dark night as an aid to infiltrate, so they don't let up. And we are seeing that incidents continue to take place. In fact, in summer, we've seen a little spike. The point I wish to make on the second aspect is that terrorism as we know it, that really has not been affected very much by the COVID. So when we say counter-terrorism, we also have to take into account the reality that the usual so-called conventional or the terrorism that we already had, despite the COVID restrictions and other norms to be followed, we will have to continue to deal with that. That is a point that we need to keep in mind, because I'll just end by saying the last sentence. I would say, for instance, all of us who are, let's say, when we talk of terrorism in India, we straightway what comes to our mind is JNK. Can you see? Nice to see Dr. Vaid here and Garib Das here. So we work together, and so we are all a lot of JNK biases here. No, when what happened in JNK is as the curves were being just lifted, that's the time COVID struck us, and so maybe at tactical level there was a little caution in terms of congregation and stone pelting. It may have helped a bit, but overall we have to fight terrorism and find ways of doing it through the COVID. Thank you, Gaurav.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for your comments. And I'll now go to Dr. S.P. Vaid, sir. Dr. S.P. Vaid, sir, Jai Hind, sir, and a very warm welcome to you.
Thank you.
So my question to you is, sir, that there were certain media reports, unsubstantiated, of course, and there were rumors that Pakistan is trying to push in infiltrators who are COVID positive. You must have heard those rumors and reports, sir. I don't know, Pakistan is actually trying to push in infiltrators who are COVID positive and all, sir. I don't know what became out of that report, and as usual, it disappeared. But do you think, sir, to your mind, do you think this is a possibility in the future? Because we have our anti-infiltration grids, which are highly effective, but nothing is 100%, sir. Nothing is 100%. People do manage to sneak through. Do you think it's a scenario where people could infiltrate from across? Could this be a strategy, sir? I'm just crystal gazing, and requesting you to crystal gaze as well, sir.
Gaurav, I'm aware of this report which you are mentioning, and the rogue state which Pakistan is, you can't trust it. It can stoop low to any level and do anything. One can have a wild imagination about Pakistan and its rogue agency ISI. To infect security forces, to infect the local police and paramilitary forces, Pakistan could anytime do this. I do not trust these people at all. But one point which comes to my mind is when COVID, you send people, push people with COVID infection in the valley, let's say, then can you limit it only to security forces or police forces? If it impacts the local population, Pakistan will have apprehensions of annoying the whole population. So that I think would be a deterrent for them. But I also believe that Pakistan has no love for people of Kashmir. It only uses the people of Kashmir for its geopolitical plan, and it has no love lost for them. But to continue its game plan, it would not like to annoy the general people of the valley. For the rest of country, yes, Pakistan has been pushing drugs, pushing fake currency and all those things. It can resort to bioterrorism also. If, as you were mentioning about China's reports about China's winning Third World War without firing even one missile, as reports are coming, speculating in the media, if it is true, then I think the world must sit and think where General Dua was mentioning it. We all need to sit and think about how to counter such future attacks. And it also throws up possibility of many such bioterrorist attacks. You know, many countries have been blackmailing, doing nuclear blackmail, doing missile blackmail, chemical terrorism, bioterrorism. All these blackmails were being done by some rogue countries against the rest of the world. So we need to be careful in future. That's what I would like to say.
Right. Thank you very much, sir, for your very kind comments. Dr. Vaid spoke about this entire specter of bioterrorism and how Pakistan cannot be trusted. It has no love lost for the people of Kashmir. It has its own narrow geo-strategic interests, and it will use the people of Kashmir to further its own agenda. I go to Mr. Garib Das, IPS, IG, Jammu and Kashmir. Sir, Jai Hind, and a very warm welcome to the show, sir. And if I may ask you a question, this is in cricketing terms, you would call it a dusra, which is a more convoluted form of a googly, I think. So, when this entire, and my question is to Mr. Garib Das, IPS, when this entire thing happened, the abrogation of Article 370 and 35A, when it happened, so there were restrictions in Jammu and Kashmir. So internet was snapped, telephone communication, SMS, everything went. And there wasn't that kind of curfew that Pakistan has been speaking about, because I went many times post-abrogation. But, I've seen, honestly speaking, seen traffic jams in Srinagar. So, which was very surprising because Pakistan was saying something else now. So my question to him is, sir, do you think that, in this entire scenario, this coming of COVID, and I know it's wrong to phrase the question like that, but it's been in my mind for a long time. Do you think it has actually helped stabilize the conditions in J&K? Because, without actually having to put a curfew, without actually having to stop people, without actually having to say no stone pelters on the road, or having to take that sort of action, because of COVID, many people were indoors. So did it somehow help the security situation in Kashmir, if you look at it from another angle? I'll just go back to General Dua in that case, if that's okay with you. So the same question, sir, that I wanted to ask Mr. Garib Das. Now, this has been troubling me for a while, sir. That sort of this thing. Did it help? Did COVID actually help to calm down J&K? Because the reports from J&K which are coming, and my team was there, sir. My team returned yesterday from Jammu and Kashmir, and they spent around 10-15 days talking to the people. People have accepted the abrogation of Article 370. Now they're talking about statehood. Nobody is talking about the so-called that Azadi fantasy that was floated around by the Hurriyat in Pakistan. And people are talking about, theek hai, hat gaya, we know it's not coming back. We know it's not going to happen. Now, what about the roads? What about schools? What about the human development happening in J&K? All said and done, sir. Do you think that COVID actually helped stabilize the law and order situation in the Kashmir Valley?
Please reload. Yeah, sorry, I just waited for Aditya to finish speaking. Gaurav, in my view, just see how 370 had panned out. I mean, the first, let's say the second half of last year, till about Jan, it was actually, because of Article 370, there were a lot of curbs and restrictions, including detentions, as we all know.
Sure.
What happened after that is, as 6 months were getting over, we got in the month of February, we were just getting into a bit of a COVID situation. And by the time this entire lockdown came, while a lot of people were starting to get released, some amount of mobile connectivity was being given. It was in a graduated manner. Around that time, when the COVID, let me call it COVID curfews were there, and it was like more like people were, instead of being enforced, people wanted not to go out also. So the square answer to your question is, in my view, yes. I think the time that we could have also seen some form of protest spilling, anger spilling on the streets, while there was a bit of a political vacuum for people to organize it. The Hurriyat, as we know now, was a bit of a spent force that could not really muster the kind of people, but we couldn't have ruled out anger spilling on the street as it happened after Burhanwani, as it happens after every such encounter of killing. Now, my point is, to that extent, and I'm repeating myself, that yes, COVID situation did help, that people were naturally cautious to come out. So in that, after it passed, right now also, now there is acceptance, like you said it. I also say it often. A lot of people will disagree. In fact, I would qualify it to say there is another big segment in which, in their mind, there is a resigned acceptance. I mean, they may not be very happy about it, but there is a resigned acceptance. Okay, they've accepted this fate. Now they look forward to some political aspirations. They look forward to, I mean, that they want to seek revocation, whatever else. But on the other hand, they're looking forward to administration delivering something. And on both sides, there is a perception. But back to COVID, square answer to your question, I think this COVID situation is another leveler, and we really have to factor it in every development that takes place in J2.
So thank you very much, sir. And I'll go back again to Dr. S.P. Vaid, sir, and throw the next question to him. Dr. Vaid, sir, you know what General Dua said makes a lot of sense at many levels. Simple, yet sophisticated, in the sense that what has happened in Kashmir is that there is a resigned acceptance to the fact that 370, 35A are not coming back. The fact that you may seek revocation, you may seek statehood, but that is again a political process. My question to you, Dr. Vaid, sir, is how do you think COVID has impacted politics in Jammu and Kashmir? And because it is about terrorism, and the thing is that it has been very, very closely linked. Now, I don't want to be extremely explicit here, but the fact of the matter is that there have been political parties in Kashmir with very, very close links to the Jamaat-e-Islami, with their cadres full of ex-Hizbul Mujahideen members, etc., etc. Without making it political in any way, how do you think it has impacted the overall scenario, the counter-terrorism scenario in Jammu and Kashmir? Dr. S.P. Vaid, sir.
See, Gaurav, as far as political activity is concerned, it is particularly after the COVID. Earlier, as General Dua was saying, before March, it was restrictions, but now restrictions have been eased, and some of the leaders are still in their house arrest, but many of them have been released. In spite of that, there is absolutely no political activity, excepting statements coming out from few leaders. You must have heard Dr. Farooq Abdullah's interview 2 days back, that we stand by Gupkar resolution, and once all the leaders are released, we are going to these voices will come, but political activity for the time being is absolutely not there in the valley. It might, improvement in situation improve with a few more months as things improve, but as things stand today, the political activity is not there. Coming to your point, the impact of COVID on the counter terrorism. See, the COVID-19 has definitely created a fear psychosis in the minds of people, and now you must have seen during the anti-terrorist operations, you don't see young boys coming in hordes and pelting stones and creating law and order. Now those things are past. If you recall, during my time post Burhan, in
Yes,
fact, General Dua was also there. He knows it. There used to be a lot of clamor for handing over the dead bodies and then their burial and all those issues related, and then gathering of the huge crowds of the youth. Now, undertaking anti-terrorist operations also have a lot of issues with COVID-19. You see, each operation involves multiple forces and a lot of people from all the forces. Ultimately, that the concept of social distances becomes problem, and even routine cordon and search, routine checking on the highways has been impacted. Uh, as General Dua said, but Jawans are doing their job. They today they can't leave the border and allow terrorists to sneak in. Similarly, the policemen cannot leave the junctions and allow free movement to the terrorists and other anti-national elements. So, in spite of huge risk of the COVID-19, and the impact it has on the anti-militancy operation, anti-terrorist operation, the security forces and police services are doing their job. In fact, many of them, in thousands, have been infected. If you take the figure for the whole country, and hundreds of them have laid down their life fighting COVID. So, in spite of all these difficulties, which COVID-19 has brought on the anti-terrorist operation, the operations continue, and they continue, and we continue to have successes.
absolutely. Thank you very much, sir. I think Mr. Garib Das has joined us. And if we can have him on the screen, I would like to ask a question and get his point of view on a certain matter. Would request the GCTC technical team to Mr. Garib Das, can you hear me, please?
Okay, right. Thank you so much, Aditya, for assisting me in this technological hazard. Good evening, Gaurav. Jai Hind. I'm sorry.
Good evening, sir. Jai Hind, sir.
Interruption. And I'll take your first question. I'll definitely answer what you posed me. I'm sure Lieutenant General Dua and our DG senior officer has already replied, but maybe as a cost of repetition. Just give me a few seconds. Maybe I'll be taking my own time because we are supposed to finish it in 45 minutes, whatever we have been told by the MC. Gaurav, the very first question which you have posed, like it can be a bioterrorism and the jury is out. I go by your statement and I fully agree. You see, the changing world, global reality is geopolitics, how it is changing. And I will take you back to the Black Death syndrome, when the power was shifted from Portugal to Spain, and then from Spain to France, and then France to Britain, and then we have suffered. India has experienced that kind of 200, 300 years of our slavery. Has shifted to America after the Marshall Plan and many other things. I think you have to see the entire issue of COVID-19 in a broader perspective. Like Dr. Shekhar, our honorable governor, has already pointed out like how the Russians were drove out of Afghanistan with the creation of jihadis, with the assistance of Taliban and Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. Now the question is, all of a sudden the emerging of COVID-19 from Wuhan is really a mysterious kind of thing. There are many things, the American intelligence agencies, the European intelligence agencies, and many other countries probably are doing hard work to find out where is the origin for this virus. Now, coming back to the virus and pandemic related to the counter-terrorism operations, as you said, like after Article 35, Article 370 and 35A has been removed, and how it has impacted, like there was seen the crowded jams and the people were coming out on the road and many other things, which was a positive thing, as you know, from the establishment point of view. Lieutenant General Dua and our DGB have worked together. The terrorists, they have strategized many things in the past by attacking certain kind of things. Now, hitting communication towers and then disrupting convoys and carrying out bomb blasts in vital installations, maybe in the GNP assembly. These are some of the spectacular events which they have carried out to take the media attention and to carry out their operations, whatever they think and plan to disturb India and particularly the peace in Jammu and Kashmir. Now the question is, as far as COVID-19 is concerned, our counter-terrorism operations, it was blessing in disguise. After removal of Article 370 and 35A, certain restrictions were imposed. That was for the benefit of in the larger interest to reduce the collateral damage. And we have experienced many law and order problems in the past. But you see, after removal of Article 370 and 35A, we have seen there is a zero casualty, and the people were really not supportive of the event, which the local politicians and the local people used to raise hue and cry all the time, having a sense of entitlement all the time. Now, question of COVID-19 and the forces response to the counter-terrorism operations, let me tell you statistically, the intensity and the success rate of the forces for carrying out operations has really, really increased. We have eliminated many of the top commanders, all because of the things which the COVID-19 has given us the opportunity, like putting automatic restrictions. After March 22, the people were unable to move out, and with all electronic intelligence and the entire lot, including the entire population, is on the net, and you have many other options to explore where is your target. And that was depriving at the same time, that was depriving the militants of having a potential target, because all the movements was closed, whether it is from our side, from the forces side, from the people's side, the potential targets were missing. Now the question is, the COVID-19 and the response of security forces, particularly police department, we were more busy in handling the people in a medical sphere, to put restrictions, to allow the people to go for the testings and other things. But at the same time, our counter-terrorist operations never stopped. And as Lieutenant General Dua has already said, the Jawan who is at the LC and the policeman who is on the street, probably for him, maybe at the risk of exposure, he has to do his charge of duties. And counter-terrorism has all the time for the security forces in Kashmir have always remained the number one job to do. And I think this is a new kind of storm which we are riding, and it has having both pros and cons. And the question which you have posed, maybe Pakistan using it as a tool to infiltrate some kind of virus-infected terrorists, yes, definitely, that cannot be ruled out. There were certain reports which emanated 2-3 weeks back. Once we carried out the test of the terrorists were killed, they were corona positive. So it depends. Maybe virus has a strategy. Pakistan can certainly do that. But I think we have to calibrate our strategy. COVID is going to be, I think, reality for some more time unless until we get a permanent solution for this problem. But I think the forces, as far as counter-terrorist operations are concerned, we are very, very well versed, fully prepared, and we are ready to take on any challenge on ground. And I think it has provided more opportunities, though the economic impact of this issue are maybe the training budget, maybe your movements and other things, maybe cut short, because you have to shift this spending from the security spending to the medical and other health department and other things, because all the time you require your own protection of your jawans, of your places where you work, and all those things are in the metrics. We are reviewing all the time at a periodic time period, and whatever way the strategy suggests, we have to be prepared in the times to come to meet this challenge. And that's what I want to say in your response. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. I think we are running out of time. Aditya, you mentioned that there'll be certain questions and answers that we can ask our panel of experts. There were certain questions. So Aditya, please start.
Well, it's on the chat box, sir. You can directly ask.
I'm not able to get the chat box here, but let me try. Okay. Okay. Now, So, Kshitij Nayak asks a question, and I think I'll request, Mr. Ved, Dr. Ved, to answer this question. He said, is there a possibility that COVID could have affected intelligence collection, which is an integral part of counterterrorism? So, sir, the question here is, which I'm requesting Dr. Ved to answer, is that has COVID affected intelligence collection or intelligence gathering, sir? Especially, I think he means about human intelligence or human.
Yes, as far as human intelligence is concerned, it has impacted because you can't have a frequent movement by the sources in congested areas. You can't have people frequently coming, sources coming frequently and interacting with you. But I'm told the technical intelligence has been very, very good, and all these successes which we have been seeing in last COVID period, last few months, have been primarily from technical intelligence. That's accepting few operations where human intelligence did pour in.
Thank you very much, sir. Now, there are a lot of questions which are there, but there are some questions which are political in nature, so I'm skipping those. And I would request General Dua to give his views on the next question. I'm sorry, sir. All these questions have, most of these questions have nothing to do with the topic given. One interesting question comes from Adam, and I would request General Dua to take it. Has the COVID-19 pandemic affected cross-border irregular migration as a security risk in the region? Now, my understanding of this question is that, so there is no cross-border migration. I don't know who the gentleman is, Adam, but, cross-border migration in the sense there is cross-border infiltration, of course, which are anti-infiltration. Grids have managed to stop to a 99%. There are these one odd exceptions which do happen everywhere. But right, so my General Dua, sir, I would request you to answer this question, sir. Has the COVID-19 pandemic impacted the ability of Pakistanis to at least try and push in terrorists across the border? Has it seen a dip, sir? What do you feel, sir? Has it seen a dip?
Gaurav, I'm sure when he said migration, he meant infiltration, because that's the only
Yes,
thing.
sir. Yes.
So, assuming that it's infiltration we're talking about.
Sure.
It has, COVID situation has, does not affect the ability of infiltration. I mean, does not affect infiltration. In fact, let me try and put it this way. All of us remember that in 2014, there were heavy floods in the valley. Now, because of that, there was a little slowdown during the flood situation. There was a little slowdown in terrorist operations and counter-terrorist operations. There was, and I can see Dr. Ved nodding, because we all have been there and we've seen that it happened. It is only natural. But on the other hand, COVID is not like a flood. It is not a physical barrier that is stopping people. And like I said in the passing, when I spoke about it, when you gave me time in the beginning, and I said they would like to infiltrate. Infiltrators infiltrate when it's a dark night. Infiltrators infiltrate when there is bad weather. It is raining, it is snowing, because that's the time they expect that the visibility of the soldiers on the LC will be hampered because of the weather.
Absolutely, sir.
Similarly, if you see now, this is the time they would feel that there is a little scare. For example, we've all discussed, could they bring in COVID-infected patient? A COVID-infected patient will affect the people he seeks shelter with. Like Dr. Ved rightly said, he's not going to come in contact with a security man. He wants to actually avoid a policeman or an army man. So he's not going to be spreading it to us unless he's carrying a bottle full of germs. I mean, that doesn't happen. So my sorry for that little aside. My point is, so to that extent, during this, in fact, they would try to push in more and more terrorists, seeing that there is, for example, if they would imagine that there may be a little caution in soldiers. It is possible. There's human. There is some caution in soldier or a policeman. At a checkpoint, a policeman or a soldier who's standing on the checkpoint may not want to check too thoroughly. So to that extent, they would like to actually use it to their advantage, like bad weather or any other such adverse condition. That's all I would say. But it has made no dent in their trying to push in terrorists. That can be proven by empirical data. You see the amount of ceasefire violations which actually aid infiltration have taken place. You see the amount of infiltration attempts that have taken place, because we have had so many encounters right on the LC which have resulted in neutralizing several terrorists. All that also does not show that there has been a downside. Actually, there has been equal number or maybe a little spike in infiltration attempts. Thank you, Gaurav.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, General Dua, sir. Thank you, Dr. Ved, sir. And thank you, Mr. Garibdas. Thank you very much. I hand over to the anchor to take forward this program. My time slot is over. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you to all the panelists for your valuable insights and opinions. It was indeed a very informative session. Now we would begin our session with the Executive Council. I would request my fellow research coordinator, Divyali, to present. We have with us Mrs. Neeru Ebrol, who is the Executive Council member of the Global Counterterrorism Council and the member of Standing Conference of Public Enterprises and associate member at the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. And Haji Sayyid Salman Chishti, who is the chairman of the Chishti Foundation and the 26th generation Gaddi Machine, the key holder of the Chishti family, which serves the renowned Center of Peace and Unity. I would now hand over the session to the panelists.
After such an interesting session, for me, as an executive council member, I'll be just going through my journey with GCTC. So it's a very good evening to everyone. Happy anniversary to all the GCTC members, associates, well-wishers, the research scholars. It's been a wonderful journey with GCTC. It's been my pleasure right from day one. I have seen it grow from a fledgling idea to a well-structured organization. Though a lot has to be done to make it a self-sustaining, financially independent, self-reliant organization, truly Atmanirbhar. That, Aditya, you'll have to take the call. You'll have to make people work that we have for the next 4-5 years. We should have a good corpus for us. When Aditya asked me to be a part of GCTC after my retirement from NFL, I was not sure how I could professionally be contributing to it. For me, knowledge of terrorism was only through, let's say through the, just like a lay person, through newspapers, TV debates, etc. But Aditya has a way with him, he convinces you. So, but his honesty of purpose, commitment, perseverance, so that made it possible for me to join in. And what today I was reading Lieutenant General KJ Singh saying that in his message, that if there is a hung parliament, Aditya's service can be used to form a government. He has such convincing powers. So that was for me. It's been a very educative and enriching experience interacting, listening to distinguished members from the diverse fields, be it defense personnel, bureaucrats, technocrats, academicians, politicians, media personnel, spiritual leaders, journalists. The list is long. The discourse on the WhatsApp amongst the members is of the very highest caliber. It's amazing that we have been able to maintain the dignity and the high standards, because usually the WhatsApp groups end up in, good morning and messages and galore of irrelevant forwards. But we have been able to maintain our discourses in a very high standards. I still remember the first conference at India Habitat on 6th August 2016 on global terror and India, terrorism in J&K, role of media, etc. It had galaxy of distinguished speakers, but it set the ball rolling and we have not looked back. The COVID times has fortunately popularized webinars immensely, which has given us godsend opportunity. I have lost the count of seminars, discussions which have been successfully conducted by the participants, not only from India, but we have been able to pull in lots of people across the globe. The youth ambassadors, what we have, the interns, have been a tremendous source during these times, not only managing the entire show, but also compiling the recommendations which we were desiring for quite some time and delivering the reports to the concerned authorities. We could successfully celebrate the Kargil Vijay Divas in these hard times, and even with a very beautiful Rangarang program. It was truly amazing. It's kudos to the entire team. Now we have gone international. Maybe one day we would be assisting United Nations with our inputs on terrorism, security aspects. So best wishes for the same. Though it's a collective effort, the way Aditya, his father and his family members have chipped in, put in their entire resources, be it physical, mental, or financial, making GCTC a vibrant, successful organization and true to the purpose for what it has been set up. It's a big salute to all of them. May the Almighty give them more and more strength, and GCTC achieves higher and higher peaks of successes, that it gloriously celebrates its silver anniversary. Though I would not wish terrorism, I would wish terrorism to disappear from the earth tomorrow itself. But I am wishing GCTC that it celebrates its silver anniversary. And even if we are not there, our best wishes will be them. Good luck and all the best. Thanks.
Thank you, Neeru ma'am, for your kind words. I would now like to welcome Haji Sayyid Salman Chishti sir, and I would request him to share his opinions and thoughts with us on this auspicious occasion of the 4-year anniversary of Global Counterterrorism Council.
सबको बहुत बहुत regards and lots of duas from Admir Sharif and अभी मुहर्रम चल रहे हैं, लॉकडाउन का वक्त है, तो थोड़ी देर से आने के लिए माजरत, बिकॉज कुछ यहाँ पे दुआएं करते हैं. गैदरिंग तो खैर नहीं हो रही है बिकॉज दरगाह Admir Sharif is not open to public access as a precautionary measure to the COVID-19. Hopefully soon all our spiritual and religious organization and institution will be able to fully welcome everybody. But since this is a time for online Zoom meetings, और कल भी आदित्य भाई का जब कॉल आया था तो कुछ मसरूफियत की वजह से I couldn't send the video from Admir Sharif. But now that we are here, and really it has been not only a learning experience for us, but also it's an honor to be not just be always participating as guest, but as Aditya Bhai has always said that this is not only your office, but say that's our office. So we truly believe that GCTC is not just an organization, but it's beyond an organization where really minds are connected, but at the same time, more than the mind, the hearts are also connected. And the family has been growing and expanding. I wouldn't say year by year, but I would say day by day. We very clearly remember the first time that we had met Aditya Bhai at a international terrorism conference in Gurgaon. And from that moment, we didn't have to know each other from before. There was a special connect, and so was along with the other members here, the whole Tiku family, along with the GCTC senior members, and we never had to introduce ourselves formally. It's just from the first meeting itself, the connect was something which was beyond the formal relationship of being invited to such a important and very crucial topics of the moment as terrorism, extremism, radicalization. So time and again, with our collaborations, we have met some of the best serving officers, men in uniform of our country. The elders, I can see General Tasen Saab, and of course there are many more here, but they are not on the screen. But General Saab, आपको भी हमारा बहुत-बहुत सलाम. So we have learned in the presence of the company, not only just shared our views, but each time when we are brought together, whether it is Kargil, Vijay Divas, or it is international terrorism conferences or conflict resolution, or even de-radicalization through spiritual initiative. When we invited some of our friends from Tunisia, North Africa, which at times I don't even need to tell Aditya Bhai that we want to invite. Just people just can, who can contribute to the forum. They are just always welcome with open hearts and mind. So I think this is one of the greatest contribution, along with the addressing the most crucial aspect of our civilization today, that it's being home, it's being comfortable together, and while discussing such topics as terrorism and counter violence, extremism, and everybody has contributed to the best of their abilities, the best of their talents, and I think this will really go a long way, not only as GCTC organization, but on behalf of India, the way we have connected around the world with different security organizations, analysts, counter-violence organizations from time to time, and how Aditya Bhai has been now from last 6 months have been organizing these webinars. The whole team, in fact, the team at the office, they have been so active despite this unprecedented challenge of COVID, which itself is a situation none less than facing a radical threat. I think this is a radical health pandemic that we are all fighting. And GCTC has contributed rightly and to the cause and reached out always to us. Hopefully, we all will be coming together in person also under the flagship platform of the Global Counterterrorism Council. And the best moments, of course, we have shared at India Gate. So we remember and salute our martyrs, our soldiers, and men from again with GCTC, who has given not only me as an individual an opportunity to personally meet those brave hearts of our country on the platform and greet them, and also pray together with them for our nation, for our traveler, and also our colleagues from around the world. I can see dear sister, she's here. We were together in Delhi, and we talked about spirituality and counterterrorism. So wonderful that the family keeps growing each time we talk, each time we share, and each time we come together. So I give my regards and lots of duas and blessings from Ajmer Sharif to Aditya Bhai and the whole family, and of course the hardworking team members, colleagues, officials, youngsters, interns who have regularly interviewed us for their projects, for their thesis, and we look forward to grow together with all of you, inshallah. General Saab, Tina Saab, everybody, बहुत आप सबके लिए दुआएं, और आप भी हम सबको दुआ में याद रखें. हमारे देश भारत के लिए दुआएं, आप सबके नमन, और इंशाल्लाह दुआ यही है कि हम इस कोरोना की जो एक वॉर है जिसको हमने इंडिया हैज emerged very successfully. We pray that our success continue, and then we all emerge towards a righteous world where truth, justice, equality, and liberty to speak haq, the truth, is upheld by forums like GCTC, inshallah. Shukriya, salam, sat sri akal, namaste. Thank you, Aditya Bhai. आपको पर्सनली भी और जितने भी यहाँ पे हमारे बड़े बुजुर्ग एल्डर्स हैं, उन सब की सेहत के लिए दुआएं. Keep yourself very healthy, because we need you as our elders to keep us guiding from time to time. Thank you. Salam.
Thank you so much, sir and ma'am, for your invaluable words. It will truly act as food for thought for a lot of us, and we shall strive to achieve all these goals and move towards greater excellence. Especially, it's commendable that you've highlighted all these instances during our 4th anniversary, and we hope to persevere them with utmost determination and also have your invaluable support at the same time. We now move on to the next session in which we shall be discussing the topic, the role and contribution of think tanks in policy making. Think tanks have been key players in shaping national policies and have been very important starters for conversations. We have amidst our celebrated speakers. First, we have TCA Raghavan, who was the Indian High Commissioner to Singapore till June 2013. After that, he was appointed the High Commissioner to Pakistan. Earlier, Mr. Raghavan was a Deputy High Commissioner in Islamabad from 2003 to 2007. Next, we have Major General Bipin Bakshi. He is currently holding office as Major General at Ministry of Defence. He was formerly the head of IG Training NSG and a paratrooper in the Indian Army. He was also a senior manager at UN Peacekeeper during the Angolan Civil War. Professor Chintamani Mahapatra is currently the Rector Pro Vice Chancellor of Jawaharlal Nehru University and the Professor of American Studies at the School of International Studies of JNU. He is the founder and honorary chairman of Kalinga Institute of Indo-Pacific Studies and the editor of Indian Foreign Affairs Journal. We welcome you, sir. And last but not the least, we have Manjeet Kriplani with us. She's the co-founder and executive director of the Gateway House Indian Council of Global Relations. Formerly, she has had an extensive career in journalism and was the Indian bureau chief of the Business Week magazine from 1996 to 2009, along with being the recipient of several prestigious awards. We also have a special intervention from Mr. Jonathan Granoff. He is currently holding office as the President Global Security Institute, along with being the advisor to the Permanent Secretariat of the World Summit of Nobel Peace Laureates, Vice President at NGO Committee of Disarmament at the UN, United Nations representative at Lawyers Alliance for World Security. Our moderator for the day is Ms. Cleo Pascal. She's a non-resident senior fellow at FDD, focusing on the Indo-Pacific region. Cleo works with academia, government, the defense community, and others in order to understand, explain, anticipate, and resolve today's complex challenges. She has also been an integral part of the GCTC family, and we thank you, ma'am, for joining us today. A few things before we proceed. Please note that the session is for 45 minutes again. The audience is requested to send in their questions for the respective speakers in the chat option, and the moderator will pick the same at the end of the discussion with the speakers. Please, ma'am, you might go ahead with the session right now. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be back with the GCTC family to celebrate its 4th birthday. And the core of the GCTC family is the Tiku family, and I'd like to pay my respects to them for all that they've sacrificed and the sleepless nights and all of the hard work they've done. They're keeping us all together and informed and safer. So thank you. What they've created, and the whole GCTC team has created, as Haji Syed Saman just said, is a family, and it's very unique in the think tank community because it's open to all sorts of ideas and all sorts of interactions. And this panel is a very good example of that. The think tank community can be very competitive, but GCTC as a think tank is so open, it wants to bring in other think tanks to talk about what they're doing in order to improve everybody's ability to make us all safer. So we're very lucky to have 4 excellent representatives of different sorts of think tanks from across India, as well as Mr. Granoff from the US. So we're going to go through the order. First, Ambassador Raghavan, then Major General Bakshi, then Manjeet Kriplani, then Professor Mahapatra, and then the intervention at the end. So we're going with Ambassador Raghavan first as the representative of one of the oldest think tanks on this panel. And if you'd just like to tell us a little bit about the Indian Council for World Affairs and how it came about and how it inputs into MEA policy development and how it helps shape thinking within India and around the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pascal. I hope I'm audible. You can hear me? Well, congratulations to the GCTC and to Aditya Tikku for this wonderful 4th anniversary. And I know they have many, many achievements to look back on. And also, I know they have many wonderful events and discussions planned for the future. Let me begin by talking a little bit about the Indian Council of World Affairs. The Indian Council of World Affairs is certainly India's oldest, but possibly the oldest think tank in Asia with indigenous roots. Now, when I say oldest think tank, military officers often point to the United Services Institute, which is true. The United Services Institute was set up late in the 19th century, the ICWA sometime in the early 1940s. But the ICWA was the outcome of very much of an indigenous effort, and it was set up by a group of public intellectuals who were thinking about India's place in the world after we became independent, which was some 4 or 5 years later. As a think tank, it placed itself in the vanguard of the Afro-Asian movement of the time by organizing the Asian Relations Conference early in 1947, and thereafter a number of very important events, which were important both from an academic and research perspective, but also as important as a platform in terms of expressing solidarity with other countries who had colonial backgrounds or were still colonies. In 2001, the Parliament of India declared the Council to be an institution of national importance, which gave us a certain privileged position, firstly in terms of budgetary support. And that Act of Parliament brought to an end a long period when the ICWA had to juggle between raising enough funds and at the same time keeping a distance from funding institutions, including the government. This Act of Parliament, therefore, safeguards and upholds ICWA's autonomous status, and that in a way is also indicated by the fact that the President of the Council is the Vice President of India. So it removes it from the party political debate, which is there on many issues, including on issues of foreign policy. So the Council's mandate is to widen the debate, to be part of the widening of the debate on foreign policy in India. And today, in fact, that debate has both deepened and widened in many ways. And one reflection of that is the large number of think tanks which have emerged and the enlargement of not just the think tank fraternity, but also the fraternity which discusses strategic security and foreign policy related issues. So GCTC is very much in the mainstream of that moment, and I'd like to congratulate them again. I think that the topic of this particular panel is think tanks and their role in foreign policy in a general sense. And I here would like to enter a note of caution. What is happening in India today, and perhaps elsewhere in the world too, that a great deal of attention is focused on think tank activity because it is visible and very vocal. And it's also quite immediate. If something happens, think tanks are there to come out with a reaction to that and an analysis of that almost immediately. My note of caution is that research by think tanks and discussions by think tanks can never be a substitute for the scholarship which there is in universities. And I think in India, we need to pay much more attention to the serious study of, to serious scholarship on international affairs and on international relations in our universities also. So while there has been this mushrooming and explosion and of think tanks, which is a very good development because it provides avenues to scholars which did not exist earlier, and it also enables us to have more direct and more immediate relationships with similar institutions in other countries. Nevertheless, scholarship in universities is important in itself. And I sometimes feel that because so much of the debate on foreign policy is taking place in think tanks, the universities, I feel, sometimes get overlooked. And this is particularly so in a country like India, which is very large and which has a great deal of diversity. So while universities in the national capital or in the metropolitan cities do get an opportunity to come on to platforms and discuss these issues, there are a very large number of smaller universities in provincial towns, in smaller cities, which somehow don't have that opportunity. And I think when we reflect about think tanks on the occasion of the 4th anniversary of the GCTC, this is something which I wanted to say. And thank you very much again for providing me this platform to say so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting and helpful. And hopefully Professor Mahapatra will talk a little bit during his session at the end about that link between the universities and the role that they can play. And I know that Manjeet Kripalani will talk about the input of analysis from outside of Delhi, which is often overlooked as well. So 2 very important points that hopefully we'll follow up on. Major General Bakshi is at one of the most prestigious think tanks, now the MP IDSA, which is a very touching renaming of the institution and very worthwhile honor for a great man. And it's the sort of institution where if you come from outside of India, everybody's like, have you been to IDSA? Have you seen their campus? It's beautiful. Everybody's very jealous about the IDSA campus, IDSA campus. So if you could tell us a little bit about what it does and its role and where it's heading in terms of helping to shape us all become a little bit safer. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Cleo. I hope I'm heard by all. Okay, great. So it's a real honor to be here talking about think tanks on this panel on this wonderful day where it is the 4th anniversary of GCTC. I'd like to congratulate Aditya and his team and also the council members and the back-end team, the researchers and the people who pushed the IT infrastructure, keep it going, for a wonderful job they've done over the last 4 years. Now, I've been with the GCTC for about 2 years now. I've been attending and I've been speaking at their events, and I've just joined the MP IDSA. It's a great honor for me to be there, and as Cleo was mentioning, it's a wonderful place. I look forward to all of you to come and drop by and maybe associate with us. So it's a small anniversary for me too. Today, I just realized I've just completed 3 weeks in the MP IDSA, while GCTC has completed 4 years. But I have probably the singular distinction of having set up a think tank and then I have been forced to dismantle it. When I was in the NSG, I set up a think tank under the guidance of my DG, and the name of the think tank was the Center for Anti-Terrorism Studies, CATS, I named it. The name which was being discussed was something else, the scope was something else, but I said, sir, if it is a think tank which is under the MHA and it is being run by the NSG, then it should focus on terrorism. And the name CATS was also connected to the black cats which we were, but we couldn't sustain it. We ran it for about a year. So I can well appreciate, how Aditya and his team, the GCTC, you have set up something from scratch. You're doing such a great job. I would like to, words are not enough to appreciate, because I've been through the mill. I've seen how they organize. Now, coming to the topic about which we are talking, think tanks and their role and the MP IDSA. Now, the issue is whether you remain close to the government and close to policymakers, or you remain detached and far away and do independent research. So my thoughts on this are, and my experience over the last 3 weeks also goes to shape my response. If you're too close to policy making apparatus, you start getting sucked into routine matters. I mean, you're an independent think tank. You're able to analyze probably far better than what the people who are in the run-of-the-mill government can do. But then if they start calling you for each and everything, then you lose your ability to give adequate time to each issue. On the other hand, if you remain very far away from policy and keep doing independent research and not be close to policymakers, then you run the risk of becoming irrelevant, because you are doing research which is not closely connected with the government. So I think the balance lies, today I would say the MP IDSA is well balanced. We are walking the thin line. Neither are we too close to the policy that we are getting sucked into routine, and nor are we too far away that we are irrelevant. Within the last 3 weeks, I have seen how close we are to the government, which is not very publicly known, and it need not be very publicly known what all we do. At the same time, we are retaining our independence and our space and our ability to work and research independently. So even today, I was at a high forum, which was attended by the National Security Council Secretariat, a senior person, the Apex Bureaucracy of the Ministry of Defense, and a high-ranking officer from the CDS organization. And a very interesting comment was made during the discussion, which I had happened to present, was that being a think tank, you are able to be detached, and the product which I have presented today was being appreciated. You said that you have done a great job, but one of the reasons you've done a great job is because you're detached and you're able to think independently, which the people in the government neither have the time nor space and nor probably the ability nor the freedom to express their views freely. So this is my views on the think tank: to maintain a fine balance, not be irrelevant and doing irrelevant studies, and not be too close to be sucked into routine. A very interesting point was raised about sharing. To the extent which is within my powers, I would be more than happy, rather than to compete with other think tanks, I would like to collaborate with other think tanks. So we should reinforce each other's abilities, our researchers. We have some very fine people in all think tanks, and certainly MP IDSA has a lot of very good people. So we could share knowledge, we could interchange our ideas, and that would be the way forward. The point raised by the last speaker about lack of research in our universities, I certainly share that issue. A lot more of research needs to shift to the universities. That does not detract from the work being done by think tanks. Think tanks are working in a different dimension, more focused. I would say probably again, whereas in the universities it could be more academic, which doesn't really suit us from the kind of outputs which we are expecting from think tanks. So with those few words, I would like to thank you so much.
Thank you. That was, again, very helpful. You talked about starting up
over
a
to you,
think tank.
Cleo.
Okay, thank you. You talked about starting up a think tank from scratch, and our next speaker, Manjit Kripalani, did just that, and in an environment which wasn't in Delhi, because you have, I think MP IDSA has the option of being close to policy or not. For the think tanks that are outside of Delhi, it's a lot harder to figure out how to influence policy or how to get their ideas across, even though they represent, in many ways, the vast majority of the population in India. And another issue is other sectors within the society. So we've talked about kind of MEA and defense, which are core pillars of Indian domestic security. The business sector is another one. Trying to keep India's economy stable and growing is what's going to keep India able to have a lot of those other options. So now we're going to talk to Manjeet a little bit about what her think tank, Gateway House, does and how it does it and what it'll like to do more. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Cleo. I'm really happy to be here. So Gateway House is now 10 years old. We began really in 2009. We're now in our 11th year. And I can tell you something, it is not easy to build an institution in India, in these emerging economies where the primary relationship was really with government and business sort of lobbying, government giving out. That was really what existed. The think tanks were there to do the government's bidding. It was like a Q&A, question and answer government. As the previous speaker mentioned, you ended up becoming very involved with the government. And that's fine if that's what you want to do and the government funds you. They have every right to ask for your help when they want it. But the private think tank was really not such a, it wasn't really very much thought of. And I remember, I think I must have made about 50 calls to people in Bombay, all the companies that had over 50% exports, and to ask them that, so what do you think? We should have a strategic think tank in Bombay. There's one in New York, the Council on Foreign Relations, where I was. And I think we should have one in Bombay because, India was right there. We were on the cusp, but we were the greatest. It was India everywhere. We had the IT industry. It was the perfect time. Everybody understood the need for it, but nobody would support except a few. And with those few wonderful supporters, we began the think tank with literally around a pod of first one desk and 3 people, and then it became 4 desks and 19 people. So we're now, we expanded to about 25. We now shrunk a little bit to about 15 because we found that exactly what the previous speaker was saying, we got so involved in what the government wanted that we grew away from our core strength into doing things that were really important for the government. And while that was critical for those of us sitting in Bombay, it gave us access to the government. What it did was it took away from our core research. And so we shrank ourselves a little bit deliberately. We cut out some of the meetings that we were doing, and we focused on our core research. And Cleo, and as everybody knows, our research on China, which we began 4 years ago, has now borne fruit. So the Chinese investments in India and also the apps, Chinese apps, all that has borne fruit out of research that we began, blue sky research that began 4 years ago. And this happened because we live in Mumbai, in the financial hub, and everywhere we go and whoever we meet talks money and they talk business. And we are the ones who are trying to impress upon them strategy, and they're the ones who are talking business all the time. And really what it does, it helps to make foreign policy more pragmatic. And that is why Gateway House was started. And now we know this is what the rest of the world does. They have a very pragmatic foreign policy, and we need to make our own foreign policy more pragmatic. So I would like to say that I think that is happening now. We are moving away, especially being a think tank in Mumbai. We found that the mindset in Delhi was very landlocked. It was all about Pakistan, not even about China so much. And there was very little thought on maritime sector, the Indo-Pacific, etc. We focused a lot on that, and we also focused on business and geopolitics and how they connected. And I think that we now know that we have fulfilled our own mission. We will continue to do it. And we are happy to also see that our fellow think tanks are also starting to look in that direction, which is wonderful because inside every Indian is a good trader. And I think the government itself has understood, especially the security agencies, the MEA, they understand that this is what is necessary.
Thank you, Manjeet. And just to reinforce the point about the importance of the work you did on China and the apps very early on. For those of us again outside of India who saw the banning of the apps, I think first we were a little bit confused, and then once we started reading some of these background papers to understand how they were feeding metadata into AI weaponization, how they were sucking money out of the economy by the billions, we started to understand what a really smart move it was to ban the apps. And that's the sort of thing that can come out of the Indian strategic community that can actually lead the world in figuring out ways of pushing back against a threat that we all face. But our think tanks tend to be so compartmentalized that we don't have the complexity of input to put together these sorts of solutions. So personally,
that's right. And one more thing, you know, the banning of the apps and the online e-commerce space is so new and it is so futuristic that what we're seeing just now in Galwan is really the outcome of years of past strategic thinking. So by banning the apps, the government did something super smart. They actually are looking ahead, and the impact of that ban and the impact of the restrictions on investment is going to continue now for the next 10 to 15 years. It has given India a huge advantage.
It has, and it's shown the rest of us how far behind we're lagging in the thinking. So you're setting a very high bar, and we're very grateful. I had to laugh after the apps were banned. There was a request from the Indian government when China asked to reinstate them. They said, sure, but we want to know where your data localization is, and we want a list of all your beneficent owners. And that's the advantage. I was like, man, these are some smart people. You're teaching us how to do it. So thank you very much. Our final panelist, we'll come back for questions, obviously, to the panel, is Professor Mahapatra, who bridges what was brought up earlier, this link between the academic community, traditional academic community, and think tanks, both at JNU and with the Kalinga Institute of Indo-Pacific Studies. So maybe you'd like to describe a little bit those two environments and what they each offer. There you go.
Namaste and good evening to all the participants, distinguished participants. This is a wonderful exercise, but let me begin by wishing happy birthday to GCTC. Right. Now, I have spent about 12 years in what is MPIDSA today. And then I moved into the university. And then I established my own think tank. So I have some experience in working in a think tank and then interacting with so many think tanks around the world, and then working in a university and trying to run a very young think tank. When Indo-Pacific concept was almost ready to come and stay, and many people are still doubting whether Indo-Pacific concept is going to disappear or is going to stay on. From my own understanding, I thought that Indo-Pacific is the new concept which is going to go on for quite some time. And before even the Ministry of External Affairs established a department on Indo-Pacific, I thought I would launch a think tank on Indo-Pacific, and which I did, all by myself, no money, no building, but I'm running it well. And as Ambassador Raghavan was talking about two kinds of pandemic, one of the good impact of the corona pandemic on the think tank pandemic is this online facilities of interacting with people. You don't need money or to rent a place and give tea, coffee, and lunch to people, invite them. You can have as many guests as possible on a webinar of this kind and interact beautifully on any topic that you'd like to. So I'm taking advantage of that, and almost every week we have one or two issues to debate and discuss. We get people from the military background, from the government people who are still in the government, and of course, the intellectuals. Now, let me say a few things on the topic itself, the role of think tank, which is very important. That is the theme. Before I say anything about how I run the think tank, it is better I say something at the think tank. There are now thousands of think tanks around the globe. Thousands of them, they are, of course, in the United States itself. In India, initially it was concentrated in Delhi NCR region, now spreading into different parts of India. And in fact, my think tank is located in Bhubaneswar in Odisha, just to have some idea about how people away from Delhi think about many issues concerning Indian interest. Secondly, there are so many different types of think tanks. You have think tanks sponsored and supported by big business houses, FICCI, CII in India. You have think tanks which are supported, backed by the military. We have the CLAWS, then we have National Maritime Foundation, we have the CAPS, they're all supported by the Indian military. Then, of course, you have so many think tanks which are advocacy groups. They promote certain causes, maybe common causes like environment, climate change, and things like that. And there are so many other advocacy groups which promote social ideas, maybe women empowerment, just to give an example. Now, all these think tanks have different kinds of role to play. Number one, some of the think tanks are actually the bridge between the civil society and the government. Some of them give tremendous amount of policy input to people who make policies. Some of the think tanks provide fantastic critique about the government policies, public policies, and that can be considered as constructive criticism as well. And then, of course, there are people who sarcastically say that think tanks in Delhi are also post-retirement benefits for diplomats and military officers. I strongly disagree with that kind of observation. It has come in the print for simple reason that those who retire and their mind is still very agile and they're healthy, if they can contribute to public policy debate, why not? Why should you say that they are just residing in different think tanks and making the think tanks like talk shops? They're not. Here, I would like to say something about the point that you raised about the universities and the think tanks. In fact, there is no comparison because we should not compare. I cannot ask whether my thumb is more important than my little finger, because thumb is important in its place, little finger has its own work to do. In the think tanks that I've worked with and interacted with, you have the luxury of time. Read, think, debate, discuss, and write. It is very, very useful. So most of the reports that come out from the think tanks are having their own research relevance and policy input. But at the same time, universities are important because they provide a perspective, they provide a strong historical background. Just by indulging in current public policy debate, we don't get into the root of the issues which are done in the universities. In the universities, a teacher like me is both taking classes and doing research. I have produced about 30 PhDs. But in each and every PhD, I apply my mind, read between the lines, and then when the student is drawing conclusion, I debate with the student, and knowledge is produced. Think tanks are not going to produce knowledge. They're not meant to do that. Think tanks are going to provide policy inputs and policy alternatives. That is where they play a role, and they play a good role, right? So we cannot compare that universities is great and think tanks are not so great, or think tanks are great and universities are not doing proper job. No, they are important in their respective places. When I was in IDSA, MP IDSA today, that time, of course, I was reading books written by professors, in addition to the newspapers and other sources of information. Some of them came from the government and all. Now, when I'm in GNU, I get tremendous amount of literature from think tanks and tell my students, read this. If you really want to know, you read this. Because sometimes the university professors are so involved in the history, they don't know what's going on in the world. Just to give you one simple example, which is important in this particular forum. When Saddam Hussein occupied Kuwait in 1991, there was a television debate. It was a black and white television in India. K. Subramaniam, who was the director of IDSA, was one of the panelists, and the other one was a professor from JNU, was a great specialist of Persian Gulf region, and then of course a media person was the anchor. The first question was asked to the professor. Professor, what do you think? You have been studying this area for 35 years. What do you think? Why did Saddam Hussein occupy the entire Kuwait? And the typical professor picked up his pencil, rubbed the pencil against his hair, looked up and said, you see, this problem is 100 years old. And it goes back to 100 years. By the time it is World War II, time was over. Then the next question is to Subramaniam. Mr. Subramaniam, what do you think? I said, well, there could be three possible reasons. 1, 2, 3. Both are important. Policymakers and the bureaucrats do not have the luxury of reading books and going back into the history before they take certain decisions. They need a different kind of input altogether. But the people in think tanks who really prepare a report and advise the government and write a policy papers or give policy alternatives, if they don't read properly researched book in the universities, their work will be very facile, very superficial. That is why a good linkage between the two are important. My next point is the current state of think tanks in the world. Increasingly, think tanks are having networks. Only last week, our foreign minister addressed a network of Indian think tanks and ASEAN think tanks and made a presentation. Before that, in January, ORF organized a think tank network of the whole world. Day before yesterday, Pakistan decided that they must have a think tank network with ASEAN countries. Now, currently, a big debate is going on in Pakistan, which they ignored for a long time, how to have a bridge between the academia, the think tank, and the government for better policy input and all that. Secondly, now we realize that how think tanks are moving out of their respective countries. In India, for example, Brookings Institution has opened a chapter. So now think tanks are going abroad, opening chapters like the universities. And why are they doing it? Is it really good for both the countries? Are they really going to produce extra knowledge, new knowledge? Are they going to lobby for certain cause? Let us think and analyze about that. Next point is more critical. Please give a patient hearing to my next point. Today, one kind of think tank is under deep scrutiny around the world. That is Confucius Institutes funded by the Chinese Communist Party. There are about 500 Confucius Institutes, so-called think tanks, around the world in 140 countries. Now, suddenly, the FBI in the United States discovered that this is nothing but the propaganda machine of the Chinese Communist Party in the name of teaching Chinese language and culture. And immediately they sent letters to all the universities, close it down. Quite a few Confucius Institutes set up in very many universities in the USA are already closed down. Similar thing is happening in Australia and Great Britain. And currently, even in India, we are scrutinizing the role of those institutes which are getting funding from China and what kind of policy prescriptions they're making and all. And in fact, there are certain reports, I cannot vouch for it, but reports that even the Chinese propaganda groups have penetrated the media groups. I'm sure it is happening in the United States. They fund them, they want certain kind of writings to appear in the mainstream newspapers to promote their ideas. Why I'm saying all this? I'm saying because we are discussing the role of think tanks. Today, the think tanks are under more scrutiny and observation than before, when the number of think tanks were pretty limited. So we must keep in mind the duty, the goal, the objective of a think tank and do as transparently our activities as possible. And what are the challenges now? Then I conclude my brief observation. Number one is, of course, funding. Sometimes the government funds an institute runs. General Bakshi just now said that he tried to establish a think tank. Now it is no longer there. There are very many institutes which are really running short of funding, and my institute gets no funding at all, right? So funding is important, but funding from where? Are there any kind of conditionalities attached? One has to think very, very carefully about it. Then, of course, unlike in the past, today I find that the media houses, are doing, I'm underlining, quote unquote, fantastic research. What the universities are doing in their respective areas and the think tanks are doing in their respective areas today, unless a media report is thoroughly researched, it will not be valued. It will not be validated by anyone. So they're also doing fantastic research. I remember working in IDSA, the Far Eastern Economic Review, which is I think no longer in circulation, was bringing out such beautiful articles and research reports. Hats up to them. It was really fantastic. So certain amount of competition now going on what is truth, what is not truth, what is fact, what are lies. This is the world of post-truth and truth decay. The debate is going on in the United States. Then, of course, the social media. Social media has spread in such a way in the nook and corner of the world. They are the newsmakers. They also promote fake news. There are too many opinions running around in the world and difficult to really digest them, running riot in the mind. What is true, what is not true, what is correct, what is not correct. Information overload, both misinformation, false information, and information. This is going to create a big challenge to think tanks because they have to do more than thinking. And when you think and bring out your reports, how relevant they are, how credible they are the big challenge to think tanks that are coming up. Having said that, GCTC is doing a wonderful work. I have been part of their activities on several occasions, both webinar and conferences. The kind of people they're able to bring together, including this very group, including in this very panel where you have a diplomat, a military officer, an academic, a media personalities, and political economy expert like you, Cleo. So GCTC is doing, congratulations, they're doing good work. I hope they do better work. And as it was suggested by General Bakshi, let us collaborate, cooperate between think tanks so that we can give better facts and analysis to the society, better inputs and policy alternatives to the government for world peace, for regional peace, for peace in the country. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Mahapatra. You covered so much. I don't know where to go. The media, the funding, the universities, the collaboration. It was a wonderful round the world tour of think tanks and our strengths and our weaknesses. Jonathan Granoff's been delayed, so we're going to, I'm happy to say, come back and have more discussions with the panelists. And maybe what we'll do is pull up one of the questions from the chats had to do with this issue that you just mentioned, Professor, but being very careful about what's driving a think tank, ideologically driven think tanks or funding for think tanks, and how that can be used to affect the media and shape the debate. I'm affiliated to two think tanks. One is in the UK, Chatham House, and one is in the US, FDD, the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and their funding structures are very different. And when I work with students, I tell them, if you're going to read something from a think tank, the first thing you need to do is read their funding page and try to figure out who's funding them, especially if it's an American one. Because the American think tanks tend to, India doesn't really have this problem, but they tend to be the revolving doors for administrations. So if you have a change in administration in the US in November, you're going to see certain think tanks are going to empty out and other think tanks are going to fill up as they kind of sit and wait for the next change in administration. FDD, I joined because they accept no foreign funding. So they don't have this issue that a lot of American think tanks do, where you've got Saudi money coming in or Chinese money coming in trying to affect the debate. Chatham House is more complex, it's older, it's British, and I don't need to go into that. But this issue of where's the money coming from, how's it trying to shape the debate, and how to protect against that is critical. And what a lot of you have brought up is this linkage between kind of your message and your audience. And one aspect of that is how the media can transmit the message to the audience, but also how to understand what's going on the ground to bring it into the think tank community so it can get to policymakers. So if I could just ask the four of you to talk a little bit about the ideas that come out of think tanks and how to make sure that they're connected to the people not only who are making the policy, but the people on the ground who are living with the decisions that are made by the policy makers, and how you and how to deal with this idea of fake news, you know, of the battle for truth. So any aspect of that you'd like to address would be very grateful. We'll go back through in the same order. If Ambassador Raghavan is still with us, if you'd like to lead us off.
Okay, thank you. I hope you can still see me and hear me. Well, two questions really. Firstly, about fake news. I would interpret the phenomena of fake news. I mean, let me try to broaden the question about how do you steer your way through different hegemonic narratives. And I think for India, that's a fundamental question, I think. For a long time, we were considerably influenced by a Western hegemonic narrative. To some extent, the hegemonic narrative coming out of the Soviet Union. And really, to my mind, what enabled us to steer our way, possibly with some degree of success, sometimes lesser degrees at other times, was not so much the contribution of scholars or of the universities, but of a certain strategic culture of autonomy. I think the current situation is not dissimilar to that, because now you have a hegemonic narrative coming out of China, and I don't think we should underestimate the power of that narrative, certainly in many parts of the world. And Professor Mahapatra referred to the Confucius Institutes, but it's actually it's much more than that, because it really is related to the massive investment which China has made in, firstly, its universities, and secondly, its think tanks with Chinese characteristics. And you see the influence of that in multiple ways, in terms of the number of conferences organized, the number of projects, and some of them are pretty good research, scholarly research projects, funding for that, and so on. So I think the issue for us is, yes, fake news is there, but the issue is a larger one of how do you hold on to that culture of strategic autonomy in the face of this of these hegemonic narratives. And this contestation between different narratives is only going to get more intense. I think we are, I mean, there are parallels with what happened during the Cold War, but we are in the early years of that. And I think this is going to go on for some time. I'm sorry, what was your first point?
Well, just to follow on kind of what you're talking about now, which is very pertinent. How can the Indian think tank community, or you know, specifically Indian Council of World Affairs, ensure that the discussion within India is true to Indian benefit? It's something that's going to benefit India and not be a tool for other countries working through the media or other think tanks or other things like that. How can you make sure? Because when you have policy actions like, for example, the banning of the apps, that happened effectively because the population was ready for it. So if we're heading into a situation where, you know, things are increasingly complex, you know, and there might be conflict, one of the roles of think tanks is to help the population understand why things are happening from a national perspective. So how can the Indian think tank community beat away all of those things you were talking about, all of these, the Western hegemonic parameters, the Chinese influence, all that stuff, so that India can talk to itself and move forward in a unified way in some of these decisions that have to be made?
Yeah. Well, there are two issues. Firstly is the question of policy relevance. How is your output relevant to policymakers? It's, to my mind, it's not an easy thing, because I think there is a element of delusion which all of us in think tanks have, that what we have has a great impact on policy. I think the realm of the government and the pressures on the government and the process of decision making in the government is quite complex, not just in India and elsewhere too. And there is certainly a element of vanity in, which we should always try to curb. But the larger question of what is the role of the think tank in a situation of such as this we are presently confronted with, and I think that's a good point, really, and there's no again simple answer to it, because on the one hand, yes, we are in the midst of a major situation with China, and certainly it's a time when the country as a whole has to be resolute and show its character. But at the same time, we shouldn't let the ball run away from us, because China is going to remain a neighbor for us for a very long time, forever, for eternity. You can never change your neighbors. And we are dealing with China not just from a continent and a half away, but as a neighbor which is next door, and which is going to remain, and it's a powerful neighbor. So I think we have to try to find the right balance to make sure that national narratives don't get pushed into extreme positions from other views coming. I mean, a view on China from Europe or a view on China from North America or from Australia is going to be different from the view in India, because we are next door. We are going to be dealing with China in maritime terms, in continental terms, forever. We should also not forget, despite the current situation, that China has an economic potential for us, which hopefully we will be able to find a better balance once the situation improves. We cannot have a situation, or I don't think we'll have a situation that we'll go back to dealing with China in the way we were, but I don't think we'll also have a situation that we will deal with the rest of the world pretending that China as an economic power doesn't exist. So I think bringing moderation and seriousness to all these issues, especially in an age when the media, despite the good things Dr. Mahapatra said about the media, I have slightly different views, especially about the electronic media, where the tendency is to grossly simplify issues and narratives. I think the think tank community has a very important task in that context too.
Thank you very much. That was very helpful. I think some could argue that China did change its neighbors when it took Tibet, but that's probably a completely different panel. Major General Bakshi, do you have any thoughts on some of these kind of really critical issues about how to integrate the think tank community and your research into what's going on now, both in the policy level and in the public, as we go into what might be very complex times?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for having brought me this. Now, the issue of fake news, which is going into the social media, and what Chintamani mentioned about the information overload. Now, there is a media space. There's a social media space. The inimical forces are pumping narratives which are detrimental to your nation and to the target audience. They are playing on your fault lines, and they are bringing in news and views which will accentuate your fault lines. That's what they're doing. They're trying to condition the mind of the public in a particular direction, which may not actually be true at all. For example, giving out a photograph of a Rohingya Muslim in Burma facing some problem, that photograph is portrayed as happening in India, which hasn't even happened at all. This has to be responded there and then by the truth. And it has to be done fast. Now, a think tank getting into this space is a very difficult proposition. What Israel has is a social media war room. Now, social media is a great tool. In fact, the first news of Osama bin Laden having been killed came out from a tweet from a youth at 2 a.m. in the morning. There's some helicopter activity going on. And then the world came to know that something has happened in Abbottabad. Multiple airport attacks in Paris. The first news came from social media. So, social media is something which has to be monitored, exploited, and reacted to by the government. Think tanks getting into this space is a matter where we as think tanks, we can support by means of predicting as to what are the issues which are going to be highlighted, by designing a counter narrative and keeping it ready to be launched. But we cannot directly get into this space. We can only support this activity. So, in case of Russia, it is the federal guards who have been entrusted with launching information warfare. So, this is a very interesting subject. I can go on and on because I've just done my PhD in this subject. But I will say that another thing I will say is that you have a false narrative and you have a counter narrative. But it has never been proved that a government counter narrative has ever worked anywhere in the world. What is more important is to give the correct information out fast and dominate the info space before conjecture and fake news and false conjectures fill up that same space. Thank you.
Thank you. That was fascinating. And will we be able to read your PhD? Will it be published? Will your PhD be available?
I certainly sent it to you. I have just finished it, and I haven't gotten to the understanding what to do with it.
Well, congratulations. It's a very big accomplishment. So Ambassador Raghavan talked about this issue of complexity and how it's difficult to come up with a kind of a quick answer. And Major General Bakshi just talked about how we need very quick pieces of truth to try to counter, the complexity spiraling out into a real problem. And actually, just FYI, at FDD, we have a dedicated unit in the think tank that just does congressional outreach. So there's dealing with kind of social media, kind of answering the public's questions about false information. But often members of parliament have the same false information running through their heads. And so FDD as a think tank has a unit that just deals with congressional questions and testifies to Congress and that sort of stuff. So there are many different ways of trying to get information to the system. And somebody who knows that very well, if she's back, Manjeet, are you back? We may have lost her again. Hopefully she'll come back after just having a little bit of a problem with her connection. But she's very well placed because she was in the media and now she's at the think tank. So we'll come back to her after. And Professor Mahapatra, do you have any things to follow up with that? And then after that, we'll have our quick intervention by Jonathan Granoff, who's now joined us.
All right. Now, a few set of observations. One is the fake news. Who used the term fake news? It was the American president. And then the Washington Post and New York Times started their own column called Fact Check. Then they started counting the number of times the American president has lied to the public or given false information. So fake news is a concept which can be used, misused, abused by anyone. If Mr. A is saying this is fake news, then somebody has to say, no, it's not fake, and bring out the right news. But it never happens. Fake news can be used just to dismiss a kind of report coming in the media, right? But at the same time, that doesn't mean that there are no people who are spreading around false news or fake news. They are doing it, the misinformation campaign, part of the propaganda warfare that many nations indulge in very many ways. Now, you raised questions about the think tank and the government, whether the government listens to them or not. Frankly, even in the United States, reports have been written, journal articles have been written about how the points of view and reports and studies by professors and think tank specialists fall on deaf ears in Foggy Bottom or Pentagon or White House. They don't care. So all of them aspire to be people whom the government will listen and follow and make policies. But when the government doesn't do that, they feel disappointed, right? This is one way of looking at it. If you see the other side, people sitting in the government, either in the bureaucracy or the political leadership, they do read newspapers, they do watch television, they do run their eyes through the think tank reports. So there is no direct correlation between a think tank analysis and report and the government policy making, but a huge amount of inputs are given to the government, and they are certainly very helpful in the policy making. So it is actually a two-way process at work. Sometimes the governments use right kind of think tanks to launch their policies, to promote their policies, and maybe expect those think tanks to justify the policy. At another level, there are think tanks who do analysis of policies already made and then try to find fault with some of the policies, or maybe suggest better ways of doing things or amending certain provisions of that particular policy. So it works both ways. Now, about media, there are lousy media and there are good media. I can tell you the New York Times, the Washington Post, just to cite two newspapers, and even Guardian, they do great research before they bring out any article or the editorial. They are keeping their eyes and ears open all the time, 24/7. So we should not berate them. But there are, of course, media, both in the social media, even some of the mainstream media, particularly in the television media. Some of them are really hopeless. And if anybody is watching those media debate, they can rather carry false information or wrong information, wrong interpretation of what's going on, particularly, Sino-Indian border. The kind of debate you see and you watch on television, some of them are horrendous. There's no doubt about it. However, there are media houses, they are doing good research, and we do take into account what is reported in the media. The government uses media. Sometimes the government passes on something as a trial balloon. And once it comes to the media, then the government tries to find out the feedback from the people before making a policy. So the role of media is very, very important. Here, let me tell you that people in the media and in the academia and the government, they have their own little egos. The government fellow says that, look, we have the real files. We know what's going on. You guys don't know anything. We give you only information. Then the professor will say, you guys have no perspective at all. I am the one who is a great philosopher and a reader. I read a lot of things and I have a real perspective. And the media guys will say, you professors, you are outdated. You all the time you talk about history. But in reality, all three are important. And I think important people in the policy-making circle do take note of what professors write, what think tanks write, what media reports, and they factor all these before making policies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very helpful. I would love to recap, but we're so tight on time, and I want to make sure that Jonathan Granoff, who's just joined us, has 5 minutes, tight 5 minutes, and then Manjeet can close us all off and do one of her excellent summaries and encapsulations. So, Mr. Granoff, would you like to take 4 or 5 minutes, take 5 minutes, and give us some of your thoughts?
Sure. Thank you very much. I'm not going to try and solve a very complex problem. Am I clear? Am I coming through? Yeah. Thank you. But I want to give some framework of the debate that I think would be helpful, that I think everyone will agree. There's a big difference between a fact, a narrative, and an opinion. A narrative is a storyline that could be based on facts. It could be an opinion based on facts. But we should distinguish between that process and the intentional infliction of lying, falsifying facts, and then deriving stories from those false facts, opinions that are not based on anything that's in the real world. The consequences of that are dire. So just to broadly say we have different narratives, I think is insufficient, because, and there's one thing of people making mistakes about facts and giving stupid opinions, wrong opinions, or whatever, self-serving, distorted opinions, and the intentional use of communications to not just advance a particular political candidate's agenda, but to subvert democracy. Now, those of us on this call, we live in democracies, and as distinguished from authoritarian regimes. The use of information and the metrics of success of an authoritarian regime is quite different. In an authoritarian regime, the people work for the state, and therefore the employer, the state, has their metric for success is 1, staying in power, and 2, persuading the people to support them. That's the metric of success. The metric of success in a democracy is quite different. The government, the state, is the employee. The people are the employer. And there's a social contract of accountability between the employee, the state, and the people. When entities, and particularly governments, intentionally subvert democracy, that's criminal, in my opinion. And it should be addressed as criminal conduct. The capacity of that criminal conduct to be effective in undermining the confidence in dialogue and the process of legitimate debate and legitimate argument of different points of view, the necessary lifeblood of democracy, the capacity to undermine that using artificial intelligence, utilizing bots, utilizing the capacity of creating false social media entities. We haven't seen it. It's just beginning. The last election in my country produced a president who absolutely has no connection with respecting the benefits of empirical science, nor the value of the relationship of the social contract in a democracy. He simply doesn't care. So probably the most, one of the most robust democracies in the world, the United States, we actually are seriously at risk right now because of this phenomena. So I just wanted to put, just to lay out a little bit of a framework that I think is very important to distinguish between the use of information in an authoritarian regime, the standard of success for that, and the standard of success in a democracy is process. And the process, our goal in the process, is empowering the people to have truth, facts, and then the robust, legitimate debate of opinions, and then narratives that come from those opinions. But to just simply, just talk about it in the broadest sense. Now, I'm just going to finish in 30 seconds. One of the problems in the way I've laid it out is that the entity that determines facts, how facts are determined, and the ability to weed out intentional lying, the tools for doing that are very much similar to the same tools that are useful in suppressing freedom of speech, suppressing fundamental liberties. One of the benefits of the internet is anonymity, and in many countries that's very important, to be able to put your ideas forth and not not have a bunch of stormtroopers come into your house in the middle of the night. On the other hand, anonymity means no accountability. And so we have machines, computers, posing as human beings and creating very, very effective social media worlds for a large part of populations, at least in the United States. Cambridge Analytica, with its data mining in the last election, did it quite effectively. I don't have a simple solution for that, but I think that if there was more transparency of the origin of stories, there may be some way of opening up the counter, a response to this. But as long as the nefarious activity can remain in the shadows of anonymity, it's very difficult to weed out. But if you have if you take away anonymity from the internet and cyber world, you run the risk of a Chinese model of a state in which the authoritarian regime can control and monitor people, taking away one of the core values that we share, which is the sanctity of the individual, the importance of privacy. Our privacy, the privacy of the individual, is so important. You take that away. Well, what we have now is the island of Manhattan was sold for like $24 because the native peoples didn't understand money. What we have now is, in the United States at least, a generation that sold their privacy because they didn't understand it any better than the indigenous people in America understood property. They didn't understand the value of privacy and both the civil value of it and the property value of it. Sold it real cheap so that they could surf the internet and tell stories about one another. Totally gave it away. So right now we have a situation in which privacy and the concept of individuality is rapidly diminishing. You can't have a democracy without that sacred value. So
Thank you.
I don't have a solution, but I'm just trying to put some framework on the discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Grant. That's very important thing to add to the discussion about how you quantify information, whether it's a narrative serving somebody else's purpose or whether it's a truth that you can use to build something else on, and in the process, what you're giving away in terms of your personal information. And I'm going to give the last word on the panel to Manjeet, because she's worked at the center of many of these different fault lines with the media, the think tanks, and a lot of this new digital architecture that has deep security implications. So Manjeet, would you like to close us off with a minute or two? Oh, we can't hear you.
Yeah,
oh, there you go.
So there is one of our fellow think tanks based out in Canada called CG, and Ruinton Medora, who runs it, made a very, very important statement last week. He described the separation of worlds into just in terms of social media, where the Chinese have and we do too, Gateway House, we call it a tripolar world, where the Chinese have a state-centric model where the state has taken over your private rights. In the United States, it's all firm-centric, where the firm, the company, and the enterprise has taken away your private rights. And then you've got Europe, which is somewhere in the middle. Europe hasn't produced a good technology company since SAP, which was a long time ago. And so they're somewhat consumer-centric without having either the firm or the state as a balance. So they tend to be overly customer-centric. And the rest of the world now, it's up to all of us to, the India, the huge market, Australia, Canada, South America, Mexico, all of us to actually sit down and say, we see in front of us these three different worlds. Where are we going to be, or which side are we going to come out on, or are we going to be more balanced? And I think think tanks have a really important role to play to decide whether it is going to be a tripolar world, or is it going to be a more balanced world? And depending on what research we do, how we truly think about things, and how we put our nose to the ground and think about independence. Independence from the state, from the company, from the tyranny of the consumer as well, from individuals.
Oh, we may have lost Manjeet. She's been having technical problems the whole way along. So I'll just quickly summarize, because what she was saying was actually kind of what I wanted to say, but more forcefully. I work in a lot of different places in the world, and I think that India undervalues its uniqueness, its intellectual uniqueness, its moral uniqueness, its geographical uniqueness. There is no other country like India. You can't compare India to the US, to China. It's not a balancer. It's not kind of an ally, or it's not, it is its own thing. And the more that the think tanks of India take ownership of what India is in terms of complexity of thought, uniqueness of position, moral leadership in many, many different areas. It's a country where family and faith and education are central to almost every single individual, and that is what the rest of the world needs. So I would encourage, this whole discussion that we've had now has come from a place of honesty. Everybody on the panel is trying to find solutions that they think will benefit their country, not their pocketbook, not their institution, you know, their country. And if India is strong and stable, the rest of the world will be better off. So don't look to us for your answers or your models or your comparisons or anything like that. Lead us in the way that only India can. So thank you very much for participating in this, and I look forward to learning from each of your institutions and from GCTC for many years to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And thank you to all the panelists. It was indeed a very invigorating session, and I'm sure all the audience have several key aspects and important takeaways to think about right now, because we covered so many aspects ranging from media to government institutions to universities, and I'm glad we all dealt with it in a different way. So thank you, all of you. With this, we have almost reached the end of the celebration. I would like to call upon Lieutenant General Atta Hasnain to give the valedictory address. Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hasnain, PVSM, UYSM, AVSM, SM, VSM Bar, is a retired general of the Indian Army. His last assignment in service was as the military secretary of the Indian Army. Prior to that, he commanded the Indian Army's 15 Army Corps in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and also is an NDMA member, among other appointments. In 2018, General Hasnain was appointed Chancellor of Central University of Kashmir. He is also a member of the Advisory Council of GCTC. Can we please have the valedictory address given by you, sir?
Thank you very much, Srimori. Thank you very much for that. And I think you can remove the photograph. Yeah, that's right. It's good to see everyone in front here. Can you hear me clearly? Great.
Yes, sir.
I won't take long. I know that stamina is under test at the moment because you've been at it for very long. But let me tell you, on the 4th anniversary, the 4th birthday of GCTC, Aditya, I don't know how you've taken this thing out of the hat suddenly and got one of the finest webinars I have attended in the last 5 months. Ambassador Raghavan was telling us about the whole concept of webinars today. But frankly saying, I thought I'd sit here and probably skip off for a drink, but I didn't. I sat here and kept on listening to every word which was spoken. What outstanding panelists and what outstanding ideas. And Cleo, thank you for anchoring it the way you did it. Marvelous, I think. Excellent. So while congratulating GCTC, congratulating Aditya, congratulating Datsa, everyone who's a part of the family, I will just mention a few things to you. I think what is GCTC doing, what it is achieving, firstly is enhancing learning. It's just enhancing learning. It is spreading awareness. It is creating a passion for national security among the young, especially among the young. And no doubt it is leading to a better understanding of terror, a better understanding of hybrid war, and a better understanding of modern conflicts. This is how I sum up. Because I think there are not too many institutions in the country who are actually focusing on just this much. What I'm very glad to see GCTC doing is that it has not tried to bite off too much. It's difficult to chew thereafter. It has just taken that much and is, I think, doing an outstanding job, although I have a couple of suggestions for you which may form an important part of this summary. Number one, firstly, other observation about GCTC which is important. I don't know how you've done it, Aditya, but the perception and impression people get outside is that your organization, our organization, is completely apolitical. Now that's a marvelous perception to achieve, because there are not too many think tanks. Okay, where General Bakshi is sitting, of course, is a government think tank, and obviously cannot be a political think tank. It's a policy think tank. But when there are private think tanks, when there are sponsored think tanks, then a lot of people attach them to different ideologies and thought processes and political opinions and things like that. GCTC somehow has managed to keep itself away from that. And that's a marvelous achievement which we must continue to maintain. You have to remember that very shortly, maybe in the very near future, the National Defense University is going to come up. You must start looking at how must GCTC be one of the first think tanks which must clamber on board and make a difference to the National Defense University. I think we should prepare ourselves early for that, because not too many people are preparing themselves for that. What will be the shape and concept of the National Defense University is still not very clear, although there are a couple of people from the army who have worked on the armed forces, who have worked in the INDU so-called directorate or sub-directorate, and they would probably know as to what is the direction it is finally taking. Maybe always good to consult them, because I think later when the NDU comes up, the NDU will probably become the overall umbrella organization, and think tanks may have to work alongside, or maybe still remain independent. I mean, there would be different thought processes on that. But this is something on which we need to just apply ourselves. Couple of other things. I think at the end of the day, if someone thinks that, I mean, anyone who says that policy making is far away, I mean, in the sense that think tanks make no difference to policy makers. A lot of speakers spoke that. My perception, I don't disagree with you completely, but my perception is each time I was working in such policy making organizations, working in such appointments, even at lower levels, I was depending a lot on the media, reading a lot from the media, listening a lot to the media. Who expresses all this in the media? You are the people who express all this in the media. You're the ones who's changing thought processes here and there. So obviously, if you've got the right thought process which has emerged from a fair amount of discussions and things like that from within a think tank, and you go and write something outside, and that is carried into government, and the government, someone picks up and reads it, it makes a world of a difference. Let me quote to you. 1 week ago, I was attending the Empowered Group meeting of the Empowered Group on information and communication of the Prime Minister. I'm a member of that group. And in the middle of that group meeting, suddenly one of our members suddenly turned out and said, "So here I am reading your article in the New Indian Express on Pakistan." Oh, I said, you picked it up. He said, yes, we are looking at it and looking at seriously whatever you have written here. You see, so to think that no one is reading what you have written, and to think that the think tank itself is not having a role in this, I think to my mind may not be entirely right. One or two other issues. I think also, as someone who was one of the first initiators in Kashmir of attempting to do information warfare in a big way, let me tell you how I disappointed myself. I tried it through social media, which was just emerging in Kashmir at that time. And I said, this is so easy. You know, you can just make some fake IDs here and there, start putting out things, tweets and a little bit of posts on the Facebook or here and there. You know, in 3 days' time, my people came back to me and they said, sir, we've run out of ideas what to do. What do we put out? We don't have any text. We have no backing behind us. We need people to research and tell us. Now, where does that research come from? If you are actually having a meaningful information warfare organization, obviously there is a sub-organization which is doing all the research and putting that out to the people who are actually working on the instruments. Now, that can easily be done by think tanks, by faculties within think tanks. It can be done by a lot of research scholars, etc. And it can be a part of a systematic, it can be a part of a system, this entire thing. The government may not want to establish a formalized system of information warriors, but can always plow into think tanks to do it on their behalf. And this is where the partnership comes in, the public-private partnership, in the concept of intellectualism, in the concept of national security. This is where these kind of things can emerge. Just a last one or two ideas. I think the time has come for GCTC to be looking at much more international tie-ups. I believe you already have a couple of them, but I think with some, I just saw that Takshashila from Bangalore has just tied up with Hudson in Washington, and they're having a big seminar at the end of this week. Well, if nothing else, as I said, as some of the speakers were saying, it's a lot to do with ego. So you got to clamber on and have the right profiles working with you. I would love to see some of my old institutions where I have gone and studied, like the East West Center in Hawaii, or the Asia Pacific Center for Security Studies under the Pacific Command, or the Royal College of Defense Studies in London. Any of them, I would love to see GCTC having some kind of a tie-up with these organizations. It would be amazing. And if I can be of any assistance, all will be there available to help. I would look forward to GCTC in the future. Every year you have visits by high-profile delegations. These delegations come from different institutions all over the world, and the government outsources it to different think tanks to conduct a briefing for them, or rather not the government, but the embassies actually outsource it normally. I would love to see some high-profile think tanks, high-profile delegations coming here and coming to us for briefings, coming to us for discussions, and that kind of a thing. It will always enhance your overall give and take with these institutions. And if we are, and since we are on that, why not? I mean, it may be something completely out of the box, but I think time has come where our own institutions in India. Let's look at the Indian armies. Or the three armed forces, their institutions. Look at the Army War College. Look at the College of Naval Warfare. Look at the College of Air Warfare. They've all got faculties. All of them have got faculties. There's some research going on, and tremendously good research going on. Why can't there be tie-ups with them? Informal tie-ups, formal tie-ups, where some subjects can be researched together. It will, again, the same public-private partnership in the field of intellect, in the field of intellectualism. This will be a great contribution to the one thing which is missing in our country, strategic culture. Strategic culture is the one thing which is really missing here in our country. And it will contribute tremendously. Otherwise, the armed forces will remain in their own think tanks. It's only after retirement when they come out that people like us and General Bakshi and all of us, or General Dua, all of us will start speaking out here. But before that, you hardly get these opportunities. And maybe the last or the second last point which I have for you, maybe one or two issues which our think tank can pick up as the core issues for a year, 2 years, or whatever it is. I personally feel that your work which you have already done or attempted to do on counter-radicalization, de-radicalization, on defeating networks as a part of counter-hybrid war are subjects which not many think tanks are looking at. Because not many think tanks have an understanding of this at all. And here you've got great people like Salman Chishti with you and things like that. I think you can do some great work on this. Slow, steady, behind the scenes, some great work can go on a thing like this. I don't think there are too many people doing work on this at the moment. And the last, for all our members who are writing in the media, speaking in the media, I am the one to blame. I have not been doing it, and therefore I plan to do it immediately. Whenever anything is written by you appears in the media, it must, at the bottom, the author note must carry that you are a member of the GCTC. That's a promise I extract from everyone today, because that is one way that GCTC will become really high profile. Thank you so much. What a pleasure it's been with you, and wishing you, Aditya, and wishing the whole family of the GCTC Godspeed and great times ahead. Thank you, Jai Hind.
Thank you so much for those words, sir. We have now come to a close. Thank you to everyone for taking time out of their busy schedules to be a part of this celebration. We hope to achieve greater heights in the forthcoming years, and with all the insights that we received today, we hope to keep all of them in mind when we plan our future projects, and may we always have your blessings and support for the same. So, good night, everybody.